Good morning, everyone. We're actually awake here in New Jersey.
Some of us.
Some of us more than others.
A couple more hours we'll all be wide awake.
True.
Some of us haven't silenced our phones yet.
I can't. That's kind of like lets me know what the heck's going on.
Yeah, mine goes off thanks to you. I answer the first 4 questions and it goes off for 3 days.
That's the key.
Well, we're going to wait for the first question and then start chatting. There we go. So how do you define unified communications and collaboration? What is the ultimate goal of unified communications and collaboration? How would you define the perfect UCC experience? Well, I'll take the last one first.
Can I explain the conversation first?
Absolutely, man. It's your show.
Let's start by giving a baseline of what unified communication and collaboration is. The purpose of the question is more for if you were to tell me 10 years ago what unified communications was, I would tell you that it was a phone. It was a video conferencing, very big piece of hardware in a conference room. It's not that anymore. It's a lot broader. Whiteboard got brought into the conversation as part of collaboration. Mm-hmm. So there is an ideation piece to this now. There's a seamless piece as far as, technology being not in front of you. It's sort of working in the background. So what I'm looking for on this answer is, how do integrators see unified communication and collaboration? Is it just still a hardware thing, or is it expanded into a software or a service? And what components consist of unified communications now, either in a corporation or university? It's a very general question, but I think you'll get a lot of people to give us a perspective of what it looks like. So,
I love it when you start with questions like that where the answer is yes, and then we can just keep going.
Can I jump in at any time?
Go.
Absolutely. There's no format.
First of all, I think the way you define unified communications and collaboration is up to the user, not the vendor. I think it's going to differ for each user as to what it means to them. So I think we got to get away from talking just technology and talk more applications benefits to the customer. And what you're going to find is what's ever hot in their head at the moment is how they're going to define it. It could be they're having a telecommunications issue. It could be they're having a conferencing issue. It could be they're having an apps issue with all the apps that are within their organization. So I think at varying points in time, that definition is going to change.
Yeah.
And I think we need to force it from the user perspective and not from the vendor perspective.
And I would add to that, 100% true. There are 1,000 answers to this question, but the piece that I would add that I think is the most important is that we're learning it's not the technology. There's tons of great technology. In this room right now, we got computers, we got wireless microphones, we got video, we got Twitter going on, we got social media, we got phones, we got video conferencing systems. We have a great place, thanks to our host, Tom and Verrex. But it's not about the technology. And so many organizations do technology first. They do, okay, I'm going to sell you these boxes. Hey, I'm Mr. Big Boy. I'm Mr. Big Blue Box with the bridge. How many of my boxes would you like? Well, you put it in, we'll help you adopt it. That's such the wrong answer. It's got to be about human to human. How do I communicate? How do we stop building these rooms that people walk into and they don't know how to press the button, so they think it's broken, and then they call for a service call and we come in and it's working perfectly. The definition of broken is they couldn't use it. Not that it wasn't designed, right? I mean, Tom, you run into this all the time, right? This is your business.
It's the user experience. That's the key.
Absolutely. And the ultimate goal, when you ask what's the ultimate goal, that all that technology is easy to use and they know when to use which type of technology. And that's the big miss that I think we've got a lot today, where the users say, I've got technology, but nobody's bothered to educate me on when I use one versus the other. And yes, I've had training, whatever little training I've gotten. And by the time I went to use the technology, I forgot the training. Heaven forbid I should admit that.
Yeah, we also run into a situation where the manufacturers in the industry, all of them have made it so hard to do these things because they create these islands. They create, you can use, ours is the greatest video system in the world, but you can only work with our equipment. Or in order to work with ours and the other ones, you're going to have to use this third party to connect us in the middle. And the concept of unified communication, when we first started talking about it, was any to any to any. I want to be able to click on an instant message. I want to be able to escalate it to audio. I want to escalate it to video. I want to take the call on my phone. I want to take the call from my computer in a conference room. It all should work. But that doesn't give some of the manufacturers the edge. Some of the manufacturers say, you must use our compute platform. And if you don't, we're not going to allow you to connect with that. And, we're going to have to get past that as an industry. We keep talking about it and people keep shifting sides on that stuff. But, it's not really unified yet. I'm hoping we'll see the day soon that it is unified.
Well, I think the users are going to force it. And I think they force it internally now in their own organizations when they've selected what it is they're going to adopt. Because A, they don't want to manage it. B, they don't want to have to handle the problems on it. And C, they don't want to keep training people. They want it to be simple. Nobody came out and trained us on our phones. It was, here's your phone. We don't use the feature and functionality of the phones completely now anyway. You use what you use all the time. Same with a telephone, same with those portable phones, the mobile phones that we use. The same is true with these technologies. They use what they need at the moment. They'll use another feature if somebody makes them aware of it.
Yeah.
Is there any issue that the end user is not unified?
Absolutely. Well, in fact, the complaints we get from users, they'll say, internally we use X. Now I deal with customer over here, they use Y. I have to learn how to use Y because that's who I'm dealing with today. New customer, now I have to do Z. So they got to be flexible enough. The issue is, back to what David said, the manufacturers need to make them all interoperable.
Yeah. We have Leonard Susskind online talking about the UCC is an ecosystem, including tools one needs to work together, telephony, instant messaging, email, video chat, file sharing. Yeah, it's all of the above.
Absolutely.
It's how do you deal with, sharing and working on documents? How do you deal with making phone calls? My desktop now is my phone. I hate that. I want to get a hard phone because I'm an old guy and I like having a hard phone, but I can still take calls on my desktop or on my mobile phone. And people ask me, where's your office, nowadays? And my office is wherever I am. If this is all I've got, then this is my office. I don't care if I'm at an airport. I don't care if I'm at a customer site or if I'm at home. This is my office. I can do everything I need to do from the devices that I carry. So that is really the future of unified communication. It does work, but it's such a challenge to get the right technology and tools to kind of work together. So it's really interesting.
Don't mind me. I'm still working on questions. So
yeah, I know. We got to get Chris into the conversation at some point, but he's doing the.
Fine.
Somebody post a furious typing cat gif, and we'll work through that. I guess we should also talk about, this is the kickoff for Collaboration Week New York. We've been talking about doing this for many years, but finally, a little bit after Thanksgiving, we said, we're doing this. And everybody said, no, you can't do this. It's too soon. It's like, damn, we're going to do this anyway. So we've got 12 events at 10 different venues in New York City, going all across Manhattan, starting tomorrow morning. The Crestron is hosting us at Microsoft's offices at Times Square. And then, we have other end user sites. So we have Google and BlackRock and American Express hosting sites. We have Cisco and Oblong hosting sites. We have Polycom hosting the closing cocktail party. And then we have the gala dinner tomorrow night. We're honoring Jason McGraw and Snorri Kesbu as the latest emerging technology fellows. And those are all going to be fun events. Most of those, we were doing this to try and raise awareness of this. Sorry about that, guys. We're way over capacity at all the sites. I think you can still register for the closing cocktail party, and you should, if you go to collaborationweeknewyork.org.
That's ny.org.
Yeah, you're right. Collaborationweekny.org. Thank you. And the closing cocktail party is definitely still available. And, hopefully some of the folks who are watching will join us for that stuff. Lots of great topics. And I'm sure we'll get into some of those topics here. We're talking about, IoT and the latest in collaboration. We're talking about secure collaboration, which I think is something we could be talking about. We're going to have the PC, the general compute versus appliance conversation. We're going to have that up at Cisco. As you pointed out, we're going to talk about ideation. With the team up at Oblong. And then the next day we're doing cloud video, and everybody's afraid of the cloud, but everybody's on it already. And the last one before the closing cocktail party, we're going to be doing team chat at American Express and what's going on with team chat. Why don't we talk about that for a second? Do you guys use that, Tom? Do you use that in your business, whether Cisco WebEx Teams or Microsoft Teams or Slack, or what's your experience? What have you found customers doing with that stuff?
Every customer is different. Everybody uses Cisco. Cisco is probably the most popular for us, but each engagement is different. We try to kind of promote all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to commit to any specific one.
Sure. I use all of them daily to different pieces. What I've found over the last couple of years since we've been talking about this is it's a great tool when you're dealing with a team. So if there are 5 or 6 or 10 or even 20 of you, and you want to you build a ship or launch a new product or finish up an assessment for a client, and everybody's contributing documents and paper and chat. It's great. You can't beat that. But the concept, and I'm kind of out on a limb here because it's my own personal opinion, but the concept of taking that tool and scaling it to an enterprise of thousands or even hundreds, you know, I find that when the one guy or gal doesn't participate in the room, and you have to go out of the room and email them constantly anyway, you haven't increased productivity, you've actually doubled your work. So I have not seen them scale very well. And I think that, you know, we saw Cisco pull back a little bit from their, you know, Spark. Now it's WebEx Teams, and instead of saying everything has to be there, the Cisco position is, well, it's there if you need it, and it's good and it's helpful, but you don't have to do that. You know, I think Microsoft is going all in now with Microsoft Teams, and I think they'll probably within a year or so kind of do the same thing Cisco did, which is, hey, it's there, it's a great shell for SharePoint, but you don't have to go there. I've got a feeling it's going to settle into its niche. You know, the pendulum swings too far, and then it kind of comes back. And are you dealing with anybody using this stuff?
Yeah, I have a few, but they're exactly what you're saying. They have a specific team they need to use it for. Once again, it's application specific. Yes, it's available to everybody, but if they don't have an immediate need for it, they don't do it. I mean, bottom line is everybody's overworked. And so they do what they can do with what they've got. If we can educate them on the value of these tools that'll make their work more productive, they're all in. But I find with the team chat, unless somebody institutes it and decides, yes, we need to do this, and here's why, they don't necessarily gravitate to it and say, I'm going to automatically do team chat.
But those tools are so fantastic.
They're wonderful.
Nowadays. They really drive more and more usage.
Absolutely. No question that
I
they
think
do.
in the past, there's been an issue of not being disciplined enough to use the
Right.
tools that are there. Now, they're just so easy, so intuitive, and you know what? You either got to be in it or you're out.
Yeah.
By the way, does everybody know who we are on the call?
Well, if they don't, it's their problem.
Okay.
Isn't it?
I just thought I'd ask.
No, that's perfectly fine. We can ask your red interest. And Chris,
Most
can you
people know these four pretty faces.
Can you?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Nice.
We picked the best models we could find. Chris,
Sunday
could
morning,
you
eh?
break away for a second and introduce yourself, because you are on camera?
I'm sorry. I'm off to the side doing things. I'm Chris Netto. I started this thing maybe a year ago. You guys have been following me. There's nothing glamorous about what I do. I just sit and plug away. The stars of today are actually to my left. That would be the right.
But if you hadn't started it, we wouldn't be here, Chris. Look at it that way.
You can look at it that way. I'm still trying to get my conversations out, and I plan to join you guys. And I thank you for wanting to bring AVNAM into this conversation. And it's good for us to talk about unified communications. But I'm just going to forewarn you that the audience, and David knows because David's a weekly participant, the audience is going to be fickle. They are going to give you their pain points, and that's what we're hoping for. Not just from a hardware perspective, but we're going to hear the conversations steer towards software. You're going to hear, and I'm just imagining what's going to happen over the course of the next few hours or days, depending on how AVNAM goes, but you're going to hear conversations of where, you know, hardware systems, unified communications or video conferencing systems gave AV a bad name,
Yes.
right? You'll hear from some people will probably tell you that video conferencing systems of the 90s is what kicked off the whole AV IT conversation, because the only people that really were understanding video conferencing back in the days were your telephone people who dealt with T1s and PRIs and ISDNs.
2B plus D
Yes.
times 3. Yeah. Oh my God.
And if you want to look at the history of it, you know, and where it came from, there are people that probably could trace back their roots to a mailroom, because most of the guys that were delivering video conferencing systems, pushing carts with 32-inch TVs back in the day, were mail guys who have now, or mail people who have basically now become IT experts over the years and have passed that on. I worked for corporate America, where rolling a TV into or a display, put it that way, with a video conferencing system attached to
Sony
it.
Profile on a what card? 56-inch card?
If you want to go Polycom, back in the day, it was the Polycom 128 or the 512 view stations on a 32-inch Sony TV.
Picture-tel.
Or Picture-tel with the big VFI carts or the Bose carts.
Yeah, we've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while. If you want to take the Wayback Machine and start looking at that, but the mentality back then was, let's just bring the telephone lines to the room, and there was a physical change. You know, I remember the first time I ever installed what was called a Relcom box. It used to sit in a closet, and ISDNs would come into this Relcom box and it would automatically sense where a video conferencing system was plugged in. It's like you could see the birthing of like what video conferencing became over IP today.
Sure.
So yeah, man, maybe I am kind of a
All
historian.
right, so before we do anything else, Chris, turn your notebook around just for a second. I want everybody to see in this unified communication world, he's got a pink piece of paper taped over his camera.
Yes, that's my
So,
favorite.
so
That's why I jot down notes on that.
you want to talk about problems. Okay, so and I
didn't even bring up that.
I want our host to introduce himself next. We'll keep going down, but I have a lot of faith in the people that follow AVintheAM and some of the smartest and sharpest people in the industry. So I'm asking you, there are two streams of thought going on over here. There are the questions that Chris you're typing that you're engaging with on Twitter. That's great. And then there's us. So use the hashtag #HeyPanel, #HeyPanel, to ask us a question directly. I'm sure you'll be able to keep up with the communication online as well as asking us questions. We've got monitors here. We're looking at all this stuff. So we want to thank Tom Berry Jr., who's the owner, president, and chief muckety-muck of Verrex for hosting us here this morning. I appreciate it mostly because it was the closest AV integrator to my house. So that's a
And he
really
was willing to get up early in the morning.
and everybody was willing to get up at 6:30 in the morning. So tell us what you're doing lately and what's going on with Verrex.
So thank you very much.
But take less time than Chris did. I'm sorry.
No doubt. Well, and that's tough to follow because the only thing I have in my mind is the birthing of video conferencing on my mind. I had to use that term on a Sunday morning.
You know what? I could have brought an inflatable pool. We could have done some sort of like weird, like call in somebody to demonstrate how the video conferencing. I'm getting myself in trouble. Go ahead.
We got 2 hours.
No, we're not.
We can make it happen.
We're not going to recreate.
Well, listen, I appreciate being given the opportunity to support a great platform. Yes, AV in the morning, AV in the AM is a little bit uncomfortable getting up at this early on a Sunday morning, but it's for a great cause, and there's a lot of people that it is not in AM. So we got people all over the world participating. I think it's exciting. This is the kickoff to a whole week of activities, like you mentioned. And although a lot of them are filling up or filled capacity, I think we're going to have, myself included, I'm participating in a few of the events, but I want to understand what's going on. So being able to follow up and understand what happens in those full events, other than the parties. We know what happens at parties. Really get down to the meat and potatoes of what is discussed. That's important because it's what happens tomorrow and the next day, or in this case, the following after next week. Just say congratulations on everything that you have accomplished, and we just always look to be the supportive partner.
Terrific.
Thank you.
And two good points that you raised. The first one is that every one of the Collaboration Week New York events is meant to be collaborative. Yes, there are presenters and presentations and panel discussions, but we want people to stand up in the back of the room and say, hey, I want to talk about this, or I have a question, or what are you doing? So this is collaborative today, but all of them are going to be, we all want to gain something from that. So thank you for hosting, Tom. I appreciate it. We know that you have a bunch of people here. If you want to come in and out and replace yourself whenever you like, feel free. This is all going to be casual and fun. And Ann, why don't you introduce yourself?
Good morning. I'm Ann Aaron. I am the founding chairperson of IMCCA, which is the Nonprofit Industry Association for our industry, and we are the sponsor of Collaboration Week New York. I am also president of a 37-year management consulting firm. And get back to Chris's point, I started 45 years ago when the first commercial offering was made in the conferencing space by AT&T. So I too go way back, and we've come a long way. But we hope you will all be supportive of Collaboration Week New York. And if you're not IMCCA members, it's free to end users, nominal fee for vendors. Just go to imcca.org. We've been around since 1998.
Cool. And I'm, you guys know me, I'm David Danto. I'm NJ David on Twitter. I just changed jobs. I'm now I don't know how many people have read this already. I am the director of UC Strategy and Research for Plantronics Polycom. And Plantronics Polycom will be, we're hosting the closing party of Collaboration Week New York, but we'll also be coming out with our new co-branding, stay tuned for that at Enterprise Connect coming up. And it's absolutely my pleasure to stay involved in the industry. Everybody knows I'm one of the single most reachable people on the planet. Tweet to me, email, call. I have 19 email addresses. I follow them all, the phones here. I'm not going to watch them while I'm live here. But I certainly appreciate being here, appreciate the opportunity to continue to be a voice in the industry, and I will do my best to continue to do that. I came from broadcasting. I was the director of engineering of the New York offices of Financial News Network before we sold them to CNBC. I built all of Mike Bloomberg's TV and radio stations. And then, right around Y2K, I kind of switched over to corporate multimedia. So I did, video collaboration and conferencing over satellites. Mike Bloomberg would have presentations sometimes. I remember we did one to New Zealand. And, you have to book a satellite truck and microwave it everywhere and get it going. And we did some of the first presentations on picture-tel systems back in those days, and CLI codecs, frame relay devices. Everything kind of came together. So I've been around the industry for a long time, and I put a lot of those pieces together. So it's my pleasure to be here as well. So do we have any questions from anybody online? If not, we'll get to the next question.
I'm still trying to put out question number 4. So we can go over the questions that I have put out so far.
Sure.
Question number 1, how do you define unified communications collaboration? What is the ultimate goal of UCC? How would you define the perfect UCC experience? That's Q1. Question 2, does proprietary platforms challenge the adaptability of UC systems? Are there situations where you trade adaptability for proprietary? Question 3, internally, how do you use UCC? The AV has a bad experience of being the cobbler's shoeless kids. Is internal communication strategy part of the UCC conversation outside? How rogue do you go with your platforms? Which ones have you found to be helpful unofficially? So to dive deeper into those 2 questions, proprietary platforms. You, as a former designer, you get to a point where you have to make a decision. Do you keep it a closed network internally because you're just going to want to standardize on a look, a feel, maybe, and what I mean by proprietary is pick a manufacturer. That manufacturer, yes, it can go out to many, but how do you design for a corporation or technology? Do you standardize on a brand which has a look, a feel, even a verbiage, nomenclature to what they call things?
Well, let me stop you there for a second, because that's going to be the topic of the second panel, third event, second panel tomorrow at BlackRock, which is all of these tools, or most of these tools, can communicate to everybody. An organization can put in their latest unified communication system, open up the world, open the ports, open the firewall, everybody can communicate with everybody else, and then they get malware and viruses and breaches of security and proprietary information, all the rest of it. So many organizations close all that stuff down. Where do you want to be with that? Do you want to put in things that are easy to connect to other people but maybe expose you to the rest of the world? Or do you want to put in things that are difficult to connect, so it's only within your organization, within the style that you're talking about? There's no right answer. That's why you have to start with the user perspective first.
Interesting.
It's
well, and I'm sure it's going to be debated, because we have a lot of people that are also specifying and then designing the specs online that are going to, will have those challenges, because I can probably voice the displeasure of being a former technology manager. Of you get locked into a system, and then you're stuck with that because you just dropped 6 figures on a room or a system that was supposed to be the next big thing, and it may work for today, but here is the problem. And I'm gonna speak as more from my technology side, technology tech manager side. I would work with a company, and it could be with Tom. Tom can come and integrate a room, does this great integration, everything works great, it does what it needs to do, it sounds good, it looks good, the picture's sized right, everything is right, communication to and from is great. Sign off, Tom walks away, everybody's happy. As a former technology manager, I would install that. 6 months later, that group, which communicated heavily with, say, our EMEA team,
right,
that group moves out. Next group moves in, they don't use video conferencing for anything. Now they're left with a system that was designed with the video conference focus and told, use this for your collaboration. Oh, but we don't have a touch screen. So now I'm ripping down a screen. Tom, come back, please. Now I need touch screen capability. Can't use that projector. They don't want to use this because they don't want to be, in front of the projector. Now we got to find a display big enough. Now all of a sudden, from a technology manager's perspective, I got a bill on top of, I need to now go back. I'm wrong, because 6 months earlier when that group came in, the video conference room was spec'd correctly. And it's nothing that you guys did, right? You as an integrator or as a manufacturer, but now the purpose changed. So I think what a lot of people are trying to figure out, and the ultimate piece to this is, how do we design a space that has communication outside, right? And still be very general so that a collaborative group could use it, you know, without incurring, you know, this massive charge of, you know, video conferencing is a very specific, you can't put video conferencing in any room. You may say you can, I say you can't. I've been given long, skinny rooms and told to make it happen, right? Good luck with that.
You can put it anywhere. It may or may not be good.
And that's the problem, because it all goes back to experience. So to answer that, a designer can say, yeah, we're gonna put some screens going back, and we're gonna put multiple cameras. You're adding complexity to this. Now it's not the out-of-the-box system that was put down the hall where, you know, Jane can go in, hit a button, and it's automatically there. Now you have to worry about multiple monitors, multiple viewpoints. This is our challenge. This is what makes us AV. This is where the companies that you know, technology managers will go with a plan on something, and we always have to be, as a former technology guy, you always have to be thinking this has to be as general purpose as possible. And you make it too general, then it's doesn't meet the requirement.
It all has to start with user needs.
Absolutely.
It all has to start with user
Number one.
It's tough, and those needs constantly change. In current today, the way business is today, you know, we've talked about on AVNation about different types of purpose-built rooms, from training rooms to divisible spaces. Divisible spaces, probably one of the most complex, if not most annoying, installs for you guys, because nothing can be nailed down. There's no hardwired anything. It's all up in the ceilings or onto the or completely reconfigurable, and that poses a big challenge.
Well, one of the things as an industry, and we've also talked about this on our chats in the morning on Sunday as well, and I don't mind being out there with these comments, we need to blow up the model of our industry because it doesn't work. The first person on the project is generally the architect. Most of the architects speak like they know what they're talking about, and many of them don't. And that's just the truth. And they come up with things like tech zones. So we've built this conference room, and it's this beautiful ceiling, but you have to put your technology in the ceiling. Only in these corners we've made tech zones. And guess what? They don't work in those corners. Or a project that I just did with an interesting organization where speakers were specified for the size of the room, and the architect came back and said we didn't like the aesthetic of it, so we made the hole for the speakers 2 inches in diameter smaller. So it's got to stop being the technologist last. It's going to have to be a situation where instead of the architect or the traditional AV consultant coming in, it's got to be a user needs piece first. And then the technologies to work in conjunction with the architects. I've got people off camera in the room smiling. Doug, come in here and say hi, because Mark wanted to say hello to you. So come on and you can ask your question in person, but just come by and wave for a second. No, you stay here, Tom. I just wanted to give him a shot to.
You know why I sat on the end here is because I like to get up.
Oh, you're going to move? Okay, fine.
Yes.
Have a seat.
Your colleague Mark wanted to see what Doug looks like.
Morning, Mark.
Here I am.
Put the microphone on. Jeez, you're an AV guy. Come on.
And introduce yourself.
Live and in the flesh. Doug Asher. I'm an account executive at Verrex.
And Doug, you asked us a question. Why don't you ask it live, and we'll go through that.
So yeah, I was wondering, since you guys were talking about how long you've been in the industry and everything that you've seen, the changes throughout the years, what was the most promising technology or UC platform that ended up being an utter failure or wasn't adopted by the market?
One of the things that I like talking about in the industry is one of the quotes of H.L. Mencken, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, that every complex problem has an easy to understand, simple, wrong answer. And throughout the history of AV and then collaboration and UC and everything else, there have been people coming along and saying, oh, it's easy. Just take my little box that's this big, slap it on top of the display you have in the room, and you're perfect. And what happens when that happens? People believe it, and they buy it, they put it in, and they have a terrible experience. Either it's not interoperable, or the camera can't zoom, or the sound is not appropriate for them putting it in, and then that's another 2 years that they don't even look into the technology. So there have been a lot of those.
I think the biggest mistake I've seen is people thinking all you can do is put the thing in and walk away and not consider the environment in which it's placed. I think audio is probably the biggest, I think lighting is probably the next. My biggest bugaboo with video was people installing these long tables and putting video at the far end of the table so that everybody wasn't equidistant away from the camera.
Mhm.
And invariably, those organizations had a C-level person sitting at the far end of the table, yet the videos at the other end. So who's tall and big? The people that are underlings at the far end. And never thinking, and I don't know why they didn't, we watch television all the time. We watch TV news all the time. You don't see the newscaster set up that way.
Mhm.
They're all equidistant away from the video. And we somehow don't do that. So I think environment is probably the biggest complaint I would have seen.
Well, we get into the situation where we know that in a traditional video conference room, using a splay table so that, everybody's got a view of the, and it's not
Right.
too long. And so that's what we want to do. And we walk in and we're fighting with the architects and the designers of the world to say that's not the look of the room that we want. I'm a big believer in form follows function. You make it work first and then you make it be pretty later. That's not the way the world is going. I'll always remember a story. When we were building an auditorium for one of the large financial services companies, we're building a cafeteria, and we wanted the cafeteria to do a double purpose. We wanted to be able to do things like this, video recordings, little front top table, and lights and cameras. So we were going to make it be a cafeteria during the day, and then once we hit like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it was going to turn into the staging area. What did we need for that? We needed some lights, right? So basic broadcasting 3-point lighting. We needed lights there, and we needed the backlight, key fill back. Very simple. No one can debate with that technology. It's been around since the 1950s in terms of how to light for television and broadcasting. And the architect was building a tin ceiling with a wave, where each segment of the wave was curving through. So when they asked us where to put the lights, we said we wanted to put the light like right there, and then we wanted to put a backlight right over there. And they said, you can't put the lights there. And they gave us spots to put the lights all the way in the back of the room and directly overhead the table. And when we told them it wouldn't work there, they said, well, you can't put them where you want to put them because it would upset the wave. And I literally fell out of my shoes. Do you want it to work or not? We've got to get, the designers, the architects, the consultants in this industry to understand that if they don't let us install the technology, how and where it works to meet the user needs so that people are the right distance from the camera and the tables are set up correctly and the lighting is right and the sound reinforcement and the pickups are right, then they're going to have lousy experiences and we're always going to be relegated to something terrible.
It sounds like it's trickling down from just the user experience to now it's the partners that influence the users, like the architects. So how do you influence the architects? The AV consultants, we know they're influenced by the end user. They're influenced by the
Graft,
they're
gifts.
influenced by
Sorry, I didn't say that.
manufacturers,
Lunch
by
and learns.
partners. A variety of ways they are educated. We do that with the architects as well. How can we have?
Well, what happens? It becomes a second. It becomes a second build, is what's happening in a lot of instances.
Yeah.
I've gone into a lot of organizations where they've listened to the architects, they've listened to whoever they've retained who hasn't got any experience in this. They go ahead and build it. Within less than 6 months, all the users complain, I can't hear, I can't see, it isn't working. So now they say, oh, well, what do we have to do to fix it? You have to do what we told you to do right from the get-go.
Yeah.
So you double pay.
All right, here's a great true story. There's a terrific product on the market right now called made by Plantronics called Habitat Soundscaping. It's redefining the way you deal with noise in open office environments. Great product. I don't mind putting in a plug for my company, but it is a great product.
Yikes, he's not over there for a week and he's already started.
But no, but I've been
adding value.
but I've been talking about that product for probably a year or two. No, anyway, in order for it to work, you have to have a sound element, microphones and speakers, and you have to have a visual element. Might be a waterfall, might be displays, might be something else like that. So on a build that I was doing recently for a company that I was working with, we spec'd it in. Let's make sure we do that. I wasn't involved in the project. I came back in later. There's no visual displays. There's only the sound. And everybody's saying, I'm hearing birds. Where are these birds coming from? I don't understand it. So it was done wrong. So we say, look, you need to put in these displays. Let's put one here and let's put one here, like virtual video windows in the room. That's how the product works. The architect came back in an email saying, we don't like where you're putting the displays. It doesn't work in the room. You have to put the display here and here. And it was, again, they were going to put one right outside the bathroom and one up in the soffit where nobody would see it. And so the first question, this is answering your question, the first question to the architect was, do you know about this product that we're installing? Put somebody on the phone who has some expertise in the system that we're installing. It's very new. no one at the architect had heard of the product that they were speccing the displays for. So I said, here's what I'm going to do. Let's get your guys on the phone with the manufacturer. I know the guy who designed this. Let's have a conference call. Educate yourself on the product for an hour. Then come back to me with your recommendation, and I'll take whatever your recommendation is. But it takes, and you've been in the industry, everybody here has been in the industry almost as long as I have. It takes somebody sitting at the table with the architect, with the designer, with the consultant to call them out.
Correct.
It takes somebody with enough gumption, and that's not the word I usually use, but we have a mic on now. It takes somebody with enough gumption to say, that doesn't make sense. Let's talk about that. I'm not, everybody else that was on this particular project thought that the architect was, you know, the smart people, and they were going to listen to them, and they make mistakes because they sound like they know what they're talking about.
We all got to be equals in that discussion. We all got to be equals around that table.
But we got to get those architects around the table. And I think that's where we failed as an industry. I mean, when you look at the events we go to, we don't see a lot of architects there.
Yeah.
I think we need to make a conscious effort to go after the architects and get them educated and bring them to these events.
Hashtag lunch learn.
Yeah. Yes, there you go.
Mark, that's a great point. Mark Coxon says there's never enough money to do it right, but somehow there's always enough money to do it twice.
Absolutely, and that's what I was just saying.
Yeah, I recently had a great opportunity we found with a major social media company. We were invited in, and I thought this is going to be a great opportunity, great client to have. We walked in, they had spectacular state-of-the-art AV. The issue wasn't the AV. The issue was the environment. It was the rooms. They were not built properly. There was terrible sound transmission between conference rooms. And, you know, basically I had to say, well, you know, the first thing that you need to do is get an acoustical consultant in here and fix the sound transmission issues, because your AV equipment is fine.
I see it all the time.
I am just replying to some of the people that are asking some questions. If there's something that you want us to address, just tweet it.
I have a question.
Oh, we have a question from the gallery.
From the peanut gallery. So it's going to go out as a question, but one of our AVNation people, Kevin Calvin from VC out in the UK.
Yes.
He's asking the question: Is the race to cloud first and only platforms slowing down the goal for UCC?
So the question is the race to cloud slowing down the adoption of UCC?
I don't know.
I don't know that I'd say yes to that or not, because I think we have races all the time, depending on technology of the moment and vendor of the moment. And so I think the cloud issue becomes a networking issue, and we can get into the whole discussion of AV and IT. I think a lot of people are going to the cloud for a number of different reasons. Cost is one of them. Ease of use is another one. I think a lot of people have concerns about security environments, but I'm not sure that it's impeding the rush to UCC. I think they're going simultaneously. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And you know, the interesting thing is that a lot of the organizations that I've dealt with over the years that have had fear of going to the cloud don't realize they're already on the cloud. You know, if they're using WebEx, if they're using, you know, Office 365, if they're using Gmail, God, who isn't using Gmail? You know, they were already in the cloud. So to have a cloud provider come in and say, we offer a service in the cloud, and say, well, you know, we don't do cloud. It's like, yes, you do. You just don't realize it. So cloud is, what was the old expression was, cloud is not a strategy, it's a tool. What is your strategy? What do you want to do? So I don't think that's impeded communication. I agree with what we said before. The biggest impediment to unified communication are the manufacturers that want to own their space by being proprietary. To this day, that's going on. You know, you guys have the GAFA term. You know, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon. You know, all of the big companies, they've got their system and they want to use their system, and many of them are not interoperable, or they need a third party to interoperate. Does that help the industry grow? Well, if a Google or an Amazon or an Apple gets into collaboration, you know, they're going to hit a lot more people with FaceTime than any of the traditional video conferencing people ever did. And they also cause enterprise executives to say, I can do this stuff on my phone. Why can't you build it in my room to work? You know, so you get all of that. But if I can't connect this to this to this, whose fault is that? Who gets blamed? You know, what's the strategy behind it? So I think that's been the biggest impediment.
It is, no question. But, you know, we get cyclical, because go back to when this all started and you had NEC and CLI and then picture tell. We had those same problems back then.
Oh, sure. It never goes away.
We just changed the terminology and we changed the players. Same problems. The thing we all like now, however, are the biggies you've named. When we started, there weren't any real biggies doing this. Now, when you have the Ciscos and the Microsofts and the Apples and the Googles and the FaceTimes and all of those, we're all cheering because we're now no longer selling onesie-twosies. We're selling big multiples of systems and devices and applications. The game has totally changed. So we should be applauding the fact that all these big ones have come on board, even though I get complaints all the time from the users of why can't Cisco work with Microsoft? And that's going to keep going on. You have to pick your team and go play with your team if you really want that interoperability and ease of use.
Absolutely. So the second panel on the second day, Tuesday, is going to take place at Oblong's headquarters about ideation. And we're going to touch on, you're moderating that panel. We're going to touch on whiteboards. We're going to touch on interactive displays. We're going to touch on flip charts and markers. And we're going to touch on some of the cool stuff that Oblong is doing. What do you guys see? I'll ask both of you from Verrex. I've seen interactive boards sort of being up and down for at least the last 20 years because people think they work in general purpose rooms and many times nobody ever uses them there. But if you have a great application for them, they use them all the time. Have you seen it change with, you know, the big players getting into the space right now, or is it still that same up and down?
The multiple 900-pound gorillas entering our industry, yes, if they're not affecting everything that we do, you're blind, you're an ostrich, you've stuck your head in the sand. It's huge, it's huge. I think you want to talk a little bit about what the end users are looking for in terms of that technology.
Well, personally, with my clients, I haven't seen a lot of adoption of interactive boards. I've pitched them all the time. They work with a lot of the other solutions that we're providing, but typically there's not a high demand that I've seen.
See, and I have a client that only uses their interactive boards. They don't like video. They are so used to using the boards and audio that that's the way they work. That's their culture. So when you go in to talk to them about video, the answer I get is we don't use video. And when they first told me that, I was stunned. They said it's just not the way we work. I had a big pharmaceutical company I did an assessment for at one point in time, and I walked into one office, and the gentleman said to me, you know, I know you're here to talk video. And I said, well, no, I'm really not. I'm here to talk all your tools. He said, oh, good. He said, I want to be able to do chemical modeling between my site and another site. And he said, I don't need video. He said, I need a really good writing surface that we can write on and we can make copies of, and we can share with one another, but I really don't need video. So I think you've got to go back to what do the users need, and they're all going to need different things. I had another user who only needed good audio, and she was in a room and the audio was lousy, so they took out their cell phones and put them on a table to be able to communicate with one another, when really all they needed was a decent speakerphone working on that table. So once again, it goes back to the application, and to the point Chris was making earlier, yes, it's going to change. It changes all the time. You've got to go to your financial bean counters, because no longer are we depreciating these over 3- and 5-year cycles.
Oh, God,
we're depreciating them over about 18 months. And if you've gotten the benefit out of the technology, and if you're lucky enough to be able to use that technology in another site, move it.
But we're also talking about a major change, not just in the depreciation, but in the cost.
Oh, cost of drop drastically.
When video conferencing first came out, it had, tremendous costs involved,
right, and
tremendous costs in ISDN and tremendous costs in everything else. And then we had this the telepresence pendulum phase where we were building $500,000 rooms,
right,
and we were doing it because the $500,000 rooms required the kind of network connectivity and management that we could have put in the cheaper rooms to begin with, but we never bothered. So it went through that whole cycle from 2006 to maybe 2012, and now we're talking about good video conferencing systems for under $1,000.
But your other problem, and the issue we have with people saying, Chris mentioned earlier, we got our system set, everybody knew it was going to be done, we were managing it, et cetera, is the cost have dropped so drastically. I, as a user, if you're not fast enough responding to my need, I go out and buy it, because everything I need is under $1,000.
Sure.
Yeah.
So or if it's an app, some of them are free, and I'm downloading them like crazy.
Right, but those systems are very limited in the environment that they'll work in.
True. But if they meet my need, I don't care.
Paul just asked the question, if the depreciation and the costs changing the way they are, it suggests that UC and AV as a service is going to rise some more. I think it has to. I think it's all about
absolutely
service.
it does. The service is key. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, as one example, the four of us here are using wireless microphones. I'm throwing them away at the end of this, or giving them away. I'm giving them to Tim. Tim Albright, everybody, AVNation TV. Thank you, the sponsor, for this. These were bought by me on Amazon from a company I've never heard of for about $130.
For all of them.
For all four wireless microphones. I couldn't rent a wireless kit for 4 times that. Is this really high quality? No. Will it last if I wanted to be out doing live production for broadcasting? No.
Does it get the job done today?
Yes.
Amazon Prime, 2 days. We've got to be working in a space where it's like that, where it's not the cost of the equipment anymore. There's no more profit and Tom, you guys talk about this more than I will, but I believe there's no more profit in the margins on the gear. You know, you'll make the cost of doing business on that. That's fine. There's no more profit in the programming, because there shouldn't be programming. There shouldn't be custom rooms anymore with touch panels that need to be custom programmed and updated and everything. You charge money for the knowledge, for the value, for the partnership, for knowing what the right box is, for being at the table and telling the architect, no, that's the wrong place for a speaker, or no, that light won't work, because we know it won't, because we're the smart guys. That's what we have to charge for, because people will pay for that if it works.
Subject matter expertise.
SMEs.
Service.
Are you guys kind of bending your business a little bit that way? I mean, do you see that happening as well?
We've always been a service-driven organization, but absolutely, it continues to be a huge part of the future, a huge part of the strategy.
Do you also find in these technologies that they've gone the way of the washer, dryer, refrigerator, in that they don't last 20 years anymore? But we've become disposable with technology, so the parts aren't as rocket science hard as they are. You know, we had a Maytag washer for 25 years. Now you're lucky if you get 8 years. Are we getting to the point with regards to these technologies also that they're more disposable, therefore people get rid of them more quickly?
Yeah, we're seeing upgrade cycles now 3 to 5 years.
Right, okay.
But what's driving that cycle? The customer having or not having the money, because if they don't have money, the cycle is
No cycle.
5, 7,
Right.
8,
Stay
9,
with it
10
as long as you have
years.
to, yeah.
Correct. If they have money, they go ahead and make that investment, do that refresh. Is it driven because the manufacturers are only making their equipment last 2 or 3 years? I don't think so, because if you don't have money, it lasts a lot longer. But the manufacturers are also ending life of products,
Right, okay.
and the
Quicker.
support. And
Yes, that's a good
I
point.
think they're cutting the end date on the product. I think the manufacturers
They're
are
driving
driving it more in that, hey, we have to compete, and this is a cycle that they're all in. They all have to compete with newer and newer technology to stay relevant, and that flywheel just goes faster and faster and faster. And
Well,
once you've done it, just like the end users,
Right.
once you've made that investment in $5 billion of equipment every year all around the globe, you don't 5 years later decide, oh, we're going to get away from AV technology. You've already sold your soul to the devil.
The difference now, though, is that, you know, we used to sell discrete things. We used to sell projectors or displays or processors or microphones, whatever it was, and they connected, and maybe they had closures, or maybe they had RS-232s, but that was pretty much it. Now we're selling things that are on the network, and once they're on the network, even if they're behind a firewall, they're still susceptible to malware. They're still susceptible to somebody walking in with a notebook,
Sure.
and somebody doing. So it's not so much the I'm selling you this box and here's the cost of the box. It's that, okay, that box is connected to the network. Who's going to give you the patches when the next WannaCry comes out? Who's going to make sure that it's safe and protected? That's, you know, we said this in the chat last week, Chris, there in the background, that I'm still surprised that there aren't enough AV companies that are actually selling that service, is that I will make sure that all your systems are patched. I'll come in quarterly and I'll make sure that it's good, because that's a requirement now that everything's on the network. Hey, the logo popped back up. Really good. It's because it's on the network. Chris, what was your second or third question today? Shout it out.
Second question was
Third.
Third, internally, how do you use UCC? AV has had bad experiences being the cobbler's shoeless kids.
How do you use it?
Your internal communication strategy part of your UCC conversation outside.
So we got to repeat the question. So we're gonna, internally, how are you using UCC?
Yes.
That's a good question. You guys are an AV company, so one would assume that you, like us, like all of us, we kind of have to stay on top of the technology. How do you communicate with your teams? What tools do you use internally?
Well, I as an owner, I will be the first to admit I am definitely the cobbler's son, and we are definitely guilty of that. As impressive as the technology is, it's a struggle for us, just like anybody, to stay up to date on that technology. And for us to properly represent it, well, to properly understand it, and to be able to offer solutions to our user, we've got to be drinking more and more of that Kool-Aid.
Sure.
And how do you pick which Kool-Aid you're drinking at one point in time? Because you represent a lot of different technologies.
all of it.
You know, hold on. This is us. It's paralysis through analysis. We spend 365 days, 364 days a year analyzing, and then one day deciding what to do, and then we go back into analysis. We do it entirely too slow. I think we do it by committee. It isn't driven by me waking up and deciding one day what to use. It isn't driven as much by budget, even though my financial people probably aren't on the call, so they would definitely take exception to that. But we do a pretty good job of kicking a lot of the different tires.
Yeah, we do internally. We use multiple platforms, and also the platform that I use varies with the client that I'm talking to. So, you know, I might do a WebEx with one client, a Skype with another client, a Zoom with another client, depending on who the client is and what service I'm trying to sell them. But, you know, internally, we use all of those platforms as well, because we have to be familiar with them and know what the experience is to be able to speak about them knowledgeably in front of the client.
Yeah, when I was with the integrator that I was working with for the last 7 years, we had to do everything. So I had to have a PC on my desktop that had every application on, and they were often fighting for the resources. Who's got the camera? You have the camera. I have the camera. So you have to get good at it. I was still stunned, even internally with the integrators company and external companies as well, when you call for a meeting that's video enabled, whether it's a WebEx or a Zoom or wherever else, how few people turn their camera on. Some people, it's just a technology issue. They don't understand how to do it. But for a lot of, they don't want to. It's vanity.
Oh, it's a vanity issue.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but
just taking pictures here, setup. I go and take a picture. I see people scattering like roaches getting out of the photo. I'm like, okay, a little bit of scale would be okay.
But you know, something else we have to keep in mind is people think if you're on video, you have to be on video and you have to pay attention to the video. Take your children, grandchildren, the younger generation, they have everything going at the same time. So they've got audio, they may have multiple types of video up. And if they want to pay attention to what you're looking at, they'll say to you, hey, look at this image right now. I think anybody over 30 is of the ilk of saying, I want to be on an audio or a web call, and I don't want video because I'm multitasking. And they think if I'm multitasking when I'm doing video, that I'm being rude.
Yeah.
It's a generational thing.
Absolutely.
You're right. Because
I
my
think part
daughter
of it
will
is-
sit there and have a couple chats going on while she's having a conversation with us. And we'll say, we're not sure if it's rude to us or it's rude to them, but it's just the way that they interact. That's their way of communicating.
And I just don't understand the vanity piece.
We have to get in line with them.
Oh,
The-
absolutely we do.
The vanity of somebody who gets up in the morning and dresses and showers and gets in their car or gets on the train and stops for a newspaper and says hi to the newspaper person and buys their coffee and goes to the Starbucks, says hello to the receptionist, walks into their office, sits down at their desk, sees people for lunch, and then you put them on a call and you tell them to turn their camera on. They say, no, I don't want anybody to see what I look like. It's like, you're kidding, right? I mean, we've done such a poor job of growing adoption of the technology, which is a piece that's also going to be talked about at the first session on Tuesday at Cisco's offices. It's not enough to just put the stuff in, but what do you do to drive ROI, to drive adoption, to get people to actually use it? Because if you're not putting in as much effort on the adoption program as you are on the rollout of the technology, you're losing an opportunity there.
Absolutely.
It has to be from champions, it has to meet user needs, and many organizations are not doing that, and that's where you get I'm not using this thing.
But let me give you one story, and it's a fairly relevant story today, where we had a client who had video all over the place, and their IT department, in whatever infinite wisdom they had, decided if those units weren't being used 20 hours a month, they were turning down the lines on the units. So if you went in the next time to use the unit, it didn't work. So they started this idea, and the first 3 units they turned down, and they did it, CEO, CFO, CIO. And when the CEO's video didn't work, he said, well, why is my video not working? And they honestly said to him, oh, you're not using it 20 hours a month. And he said, whoever came up with that idea, we're not doing that anymore. I don't care if I'm using it 20 hours a month. I don't tell you to tell me how many hours I'm using my phone or how many hours I'm using my computer. This to me is a business tool. And if I use it once a year and it accomplished a task, doesn't matter to me what it costs. I still think we've got people in that realm, especially when video's involved, of saying, have we cost justified it? You know, is there a reason we're using this? Couldn't you do your call with just audio and web and not do the video?
Mhm.
And I think that becomes part of the issue we
Well,
still grapple with.
I think that's part of the architectural floor plate again.
Sure it is.
I mean, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I don't know, you guys can put better dates around this than I can. The plate was, we have this big floor in this stack building, and every floor is going to have 2 video conference enabled rooms, and all the other rooms are just audio and PC only. And why were they doing that? Because we don't want to spend that kind of money. Well, you know what, there really isn't that much of a difference now with adding video, and we still have people building boardrooms with a 1 big display and the 2 wing displays, and we still have people with a floor plan, you know, building the 2 video conference rooms and then all the other ones. That's what we've got to get the people that are designing the stuff up to speed, that the technology has changed, that we really should be placing it in every room, as you point out, that it's a business tool, just like a phone,
Right.
because it isn't $500,000 anymore. Now, you know, it's a couple thousand maybe to have it integrated, and let's have it available if we need to use it.
Well, and if you go back to the users and you start with them and say, what do I need? They'll tell you I need to have this communication everywhere I work. So any conference room in my environment needs to be equipped. I need to have it at my desktop. I need to have it mobile, so when I'm on the road, I can do it. I want complete interoperability and ability to access these. Don't tell me it's only available on X floor at X time.
But that's why 5 years ago they wanted that, and we couldn't deliver it.
Right.
Now you can deliver.
But maybe they don't know that. Maybe we don't do
I don't
enough.
know. See, I think,
you know.
again, get back to those 5 or 6 900-pound gorillas, the Apples, the
Yep.
Microsofts, those folks, Cisco.
Well,
and
but
a
maybe
few
we're
of them.
going to get away from the term video conferencing, because there'll be people I've interviewed who said, I don't do video conferencing. And when I look, they're doing video conferencing. They don't call it that.
They just call video.
I'm on a video call,
Video.
Right.
not video conferencing. Video conferencing in many environments is a bad word. It's
Because
looked at as a
conferencing-
difficult word,
conferencing,
and
I guess it means, or it implies that it's multiple and that it's official. Conference, it's something that is official.
Well,
we have to get dressed up. We have to be prepared.
Well, look at our,
We are going to be judged or ranked on it versus a video. Well, video is, hey, I can call my daughter or my coworker or grandma, whoever. Everybody
Yep.
uses video now.
I'm a huge believer that there are too many people in our industry that don't follow the history of it, that just keep making mistakes. We were worried about the derogatory sentiment involved with video conferencing in 2006,
absolutely.
when everybody came up with the term telepresence. Well, what is telepresence? Telepresence is video conferencing that works. Ooh, everybody's now adopting the term telepresence. Then that became, you know, had a connotation of expensive. So that's going away. You know, what's the latest version of that? The latest version of that is Teams. Everybody's got a product called Teams now, because we're going to have to copy the word to move this forward. What is Teams? Teams is just a chat platform and a shell that goes around where you store your documents.
And 6 months from now, there'll be the next greatest branding announcement. Fad.
Absolutely.
It's the consumerization of our industry. And as much as we would like it to be more official and not kneel down to the past, but maybe acknowledge our mistakes and understand what we've done in the past, respect the past. They don't do that. It's all about the future. Nobody even has time to read about the past.
Well, but the bottom line becomes, if this is easy to do, and we can do audio data sharing and video easily, they're not even going to know about the past.
Correct.
You know, it just-
They don't have time.
The Jetsons are here.
Yeah, correct.
We're doing it
You got it.
already.
Oh man, did anybody ask about the flying cars? That's what I want.
No. I want the dial the number and I'm there.
Oh, you know what? I talked to somebody about that, about scanning like the Star Trek.
Right, that's what I want.
You know what?
Beam me up,
I
Scotty.
don't know if I'm totally.
I don't want to be the first one to do it then.
with the technology of taking your particles, taking them apart, and then putting them back together at the other end.
Yeah, exactly.
We did that with video. Remember those
Oh,
days?
gosh, I do.
Oh boy.
All right, so here's something that I used to do when I meet with all our clients. This is my standard regular iPhone 6S. It's still running iOS 10. So I'm never going to upgrade if they're not going to pay me back for the apps that don't work after that. Hey Siri, call Helen Danto.
Calling Helen Danto.
Don't. Because
She's
it's
gonna
wake her
shoot
up.
you.
I don't wanna wake her up.
She's going to absolutely shoot
You
you.
got to call a lot of other people other than the boss at home.
That's a regular phone. Really not trained. Just trained to my voice to understand the wake word. Are we going to get that in conference rooms? Are we going to get conference rooms that say, "Hey, start my meeting"? Are we going to get conference rooms that walk in and sees the camera on my face and says, "Hey, Dave, how you doing? I got your meeting loaded. You want to start it now?" You know, there are organizations that are starting to push that.
Yes.
Well, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
No question. And artificial intelligence we even haven't touched on, and that's a biggie that's happening.
Everything that we see out there is going to be part of our future, except for 3D.
I don't want those glasses, yes.
You've of course seen the Cisco Hey WebEx, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I find it to be really impressive. It's, you know, not only because it's the voice activation, but because it's actually guided.
Right.
Because the problem with AI and voice is that unless you say the exact specific right phrase, it doesn't work. But they couple that with having the optional phrases, what you can say, what you can ask it to do right on the screen. And then you just say the phrase and it works.
Well, think of our cars. Many times, and I speak fairly clearly, I will tell the car I want it to do such and such, and it gives me the wrong number or the wrong location.
Exactly.
However, I'm in a new car now that gives you options because it says, I think you said number 1, but maybe you said number 2 or 3. So let me know which one of these you really want.
Yeah.
So it's getting smarter. Yeah.
It's like people, they say, you know, I want to have an Amazon Alexa in my meeting room. Well, okay, but Amazon Alexa, well, some of them do technically, but doesn't have a screen. So it can't tell you or show you what are the right phrases that you can say.
Right. But we're getting there. No question.
Yeah.
There are a few different aspects to this. There is how good is the speech recognition, voice to text, and honestly, you know, if it's done correctly, that's better than human capability right now. It's not always done correctly, but just the you know, I could take out my phone
Better
and
than I speak.
just hit the microphone and on the notes, and you'll see that it comes out almost 100%, including names, which is really good. But then there's how smart is the AI to understand what I'm doing is one of the big things. How smart is that back end? If I ask it, you know, can you start? If I ask Alexa at home to turn on my lights the wrong way, they don't get turned on. I have to phrase it exactly the right way. And then there's the, are we comfortable sending all that information out to the cloud? And are there providers that are keeping it on premise? I've seen 1 or 2 at CES this year. Mycroft was one, and a couple others that are taking this ability to recognize speech and act on it and let you bring it on prem. So there's a security issue, there's the intelligence issue, and there's the voice to text. I think it's going to be big this year because people want it, because people hate touch panels. They, you know, if you walk into a boardroom and you ask the administrative assistant, I'm going to train you on this touch panel, 90% of the time, the first thing they say is, "Where's the IT guy? Bring the IT guy in. I'm not touching that button. I don't want the lights to blow up. I want him to do that. I don't want to be responsible for it." But if you tell them to just walk in and say, "Hi, start my meeting," they don't have an issue with that because they do that with their phones all the time.
Yeah, so the phones are, the usage of the phone is driving the way that people are using these technologies and the way they want it. And that's one of the reasons I think both AV and IT woke up when all these people started coming in with mobile devices saying, I can do this at home, I can do this anywhere I want, why can't I do this here in the office?
I'm getting a report online that I lost my microphone. Can you guys still hear me on this one? You know, I can shout really well if everybody else is. You hacked my microphone just as I was talking about. No, it's okay.
You talk a lot more than me.
Now you see what happens when you buy $100 microphones on Amazon. I'm on the receiver. I guess the last receiver. And the last receiver died. There we go. So we'll replace my So why don't you take over and answer the question?
What's our next question here?
What was the fourth question?
I have 6 questions. Fourth question.
We can't
Does
refresh and
UCC
see it.
lend itself better to as a service model?
We went through that one. Next one.
And the next one,
Yeah.
Q5. With the dynamic shift to UC experiences available at the desktop, does standardization become
Okay, is that better?
more important for enterprise adoption compared to traditional room-based standards and systems?
So the issue is
I'm
the
gonna
issue of
step off for a second. You
standardization.
guys keep talking. I'll fix my
Does
microphone.
standardization become more important with the UCC environment? Once again, the whole issue of standards depends on what you're willing to accept within your organization. We've had organizations for many years that chose not to standardize on a platform, but mix it up. Now, some at some point in time said, you know, we've got 4, 5, 6 things and we can't manage them. We can't take care of them from the standpoint of any security issues. We can't educate on them. So they backed away and said, we're going to give you 2 choices, not 4, 5, or 6 choices. I think with the way our world works, if you say you're going to standardize on one, the minute you end up going off your prem to a customer, to a partner, to a supplier who's using something else, you've lost your standardization. So I think you can do it internally if you wish from the standpoint of training and maintenance, but I think reality-wise is you've got to be able to handle whatever anybody's going to come at you with that you're going to work with.
And does that see? I don't know if I totally agree in that when we talk to our global enterprise clients, they have to standardize, or they talk about standardizing. They got to standardize because.
But what are they standardizing? Are they standardizing all UCC, which means all apps behind it? Or are they just standardizing on the video hardware? I mean, what is it they're
You're right,
standardizing?
I guess
Because,
the answer would be yes to the video hardware,
but
and
probably
maybe,
not to the others.
Hmm.
Because when we go in and do our assessments, we find most organizations are using anywhere from 5 to 7 different apps for meeting interface. You know, it could be anything from WebEx to Teams to Slack to GoToMeeting, and it depends on who's worked with whom and which group they're working with as to what they standardize for that group.
And who's comfortable with what.
Exactly.
That's why adoption is such a huge struggle with all these platforms, you know. And we, you know, one of the big parts of our business that we're trying to grow is our global managed services, and part of that is providing user adoption training. It's not, you know, the install's over, walking away,
Right.
and here's your stuff, you're on your own. We have to keep those touch points with the customer, keep going back, staying in front of them, and offering them ways to increase the utilization of the technology and training their end users.
But what happens when somebody comes in and somebody at a fairly senior level that has the ability to do this and says, I just used X, Y, and Z with a supplier or a partner. We liked it for this project. Now I want everybody else to be able to have access to it, and it wasn't part of your standardization plan. And to add
Is that
to that,
the new standard?
right, and add to do that, a new vendor comes out. Where was Zoom a few years? We never have heard of Zoom
yeah.
years ago, or
I
Slack.
agree.
You know, so that's why I say there's like an 18-month recycle refresh thing in all of this, because that's the problem they have.
But it takes at least that long in many cases
to get
it rolled out in an
Exactly.
organization.
Exactly. So we
If
have a
not longer.
perpetual nightmare.
Oh yeah.
Well, let me take 2 seconds while we're kind of pausing and shifting and switching things around. I want to, Chris is joining us again. I want to talk about our gala dinner Monday night. I know some of you watching are going. I hope some of you watching are going. I'm going to be there. Some very special things going on at that dinner. You know, the executive director of the IMCCA, Carol Zulkin, is going to welcome everybody to the dinner. We're then going to give out 2 of our Emerging Technology Fellow Awards. We had given out like 6 or 8 a year. We're still probably going to do that this year, but we're doing them in different sections. We're going to be thanking Jason McGraw for his work in the industry, obviously running successful Infocom shows for was it 14 years that he did that without any issue. A brilliant guy, and we're very happy to be honoring him. And then my friend Snorre Kesbu, who is leaving Cisco at the end of this month. He's the genius behind the products that Tandberg and then Cisco was building in the collaboration space. He will be there, and we're going to be honoring him. Both of them are getting lifetime achievement awards for all the service that they provided to the industry, and that I think that's something that I'm going to be very proud to be able to hand out to them. And then we're going to have a panel discussion you're going to be leading a state of the industry discussion with a number of people, with Logitech and Fuse and Viopta and Zoom and Yorktel will be on. So we're really looking forward to that. It's going to be great food, great drinks, great cocktails, terrific networking, and about 130 of your peers. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for that.
And it's going to be held at Arno's restaurant,
right,
38.
And if you're not registered for it, you can't come. So I don't want to tell anybody where it is.
Well, don't register.
If it's not closed already, but that's all good.
We're back from commercial break.
We're back from commercial. Well, I have to thank people.
I know you do. Hey man.
Good, Chris, take over.
I'm fine. I'm fine with the commercial break. It's like a dance break. So my responsibility is on Sundays to get the real questions. So you guys ready to loosen up your tie as I touch the microphone and just so you both have been involved in video conferencing for many years. True, I guess, purists in that sense. Before it was an integration space, when it was the act or art of communicating from one side to the next. Okay. You've seen it over the last 20 years. Some of the people that are online want to know, where do you see it going? So taking what you've seen, taking the trends that you've seen in industry, it's a very real question, because as integrators, the audience that is integrators are very much used to equipment being pulled off a shelf and installed in a space, and then the communication happening. And you both have alluded to the fact that it's about the end user and how the end user uses unified communication. So with that in mind, what is the next evolution for AV, for unified communications, for the end user, for the integrator, for example? Now that Tom's not in here, we can talk candidly about integrators.
Well, I think, we like to say that AV and IT have converged. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're totally converged in all organizations.
I would agree.
So I think there's going to be more emphasis on getting that convergence to take place, if for no other reason than the technologies themselves have become more IT capable. So you have to become more knowledgeable about it. And on the flip side, the IT people have got to be more knowledgeable about the AV end of it and what does work in environments, what needs to be done to an environment so you can hear, so you can see. Mm-hmm. I also think the other thing that's going to be biggie, and it's started, but I think you're going to see a big uptake on it, is all of this artificial intelligence. Making all of this easier to do by technology, but the user doesn't have to get involved in it any more than, as David said before, dial my meeting, call my meeting.
That statement alone is not it's not foreign to many of the people that are watching. It's not foreign to the people that are online and tweeting about it. The unicorn of AV control or AV programming has always been a one button press.
Right.
If you get to the no button press, then you've hit nirvana.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, so that is the main goal. Less pages, less tabs, less button presses, more just happening that naturally. Ironically, the only way for things to become natural is to add an artificial intelligence to it. Very bizarre, but I get where you're going with that. So AI is going to play an important part. We're starting to see that in cameras already with, they're using predictability and facial recognition to move the cameras and move it along. That's going to open up a whole different discussion on the Twitters right now, as far as facial recognition and the use of that in cameras and camera and privacy. And I'm sure that will spin off into its own little discussion to the side. AI definitely is part of the future. So I got to ask the question, because everybody, when we start talking about this, starts going down that minority report. Where are we with the AR and VR components in this? How far out is it? Now, I'm not branding you guys as futurists, but let's put on the let's put on the aluminum foil hats and
let me answer the bigger question, and then let me go there. The interesting thing, like I said before, about following this industry is you need to be a student of history.
Mhm.
You know, history does definitely repeat itself in this industry.
Absolutely.
You have a situation, if you remember back to the mid-1960s, anybody remember what I'm talking about when I use the term Carter phone decision?
Sure.
AT&T
So does-
was a monopoly, and they were providing the phones. They were building them, you know, Bell System phones through Western Electric, and a third-party company came along and said they wanted to build phones for the network, and AT&T refused to put them on the network because it wasn't built by them. Went to the FCC, it was adjudicated, everybody figured it out, it was allowed. The Carter phone was now allowed to be on this because that's how it was. You have major manufacturers right now that are saying, in order to use my newest system, you have to use one of my computers. How long is that going to last? How long is it going to last when in order to collaborate with a third-party company, maybe I'm going to buy your platform and all of my systems, but when I need to call my customer or I need to call my business supplier, it won't work because they're not using the same computing platform. Clearly, that's not going to last, no matter how much any of the manufacturers want it. That didn't last in telepresence. Remember, the first telepresence systems wouldn't allow interoperability with systems. That won't last with what's coming out today. So the future is going to be all these people that are building islands are going to have to stop doing it, or they'll fall away.
Oh, they'll get acquired. Look how many firms have already been acquired.
Sure.
I.e., look who you've just gone with. Plantronics acquired Polycom. And you're going to see more of that. But back to your point about timing on all of this, I think this is an evolutionary process, not a revolutionary process. I think all of this happens over time. So, want me to put a time scale on it?
Yes, please.
I'm going to say 3 to 5 years. Now, that does not mean in the meantime that there isn't going to be some revolutionary product that comes in that throws a monkey wrench into the whole thing. Because there are people working behind the scenes all the time on this. I think the AI piece of it is a 3 to 5 year scale before you're going to see it.
And like I've said, I've been quoted online as saying by the end of this year, you're going to see a heck of a lot more, at least of the AI and voice control in conference rooms. That whole programming piece is going away rapidly. I think by the end of this year, you're going to see, I think you'll see some things at Enterprise Connect in a few weeks. And I think by Infocom time, you're definitely going to be seeing some products in the space that are touching on that. Will they be the ones that we eventually use in the industry? I don't know. That's a tough question to answer. But, you know, we don't use Diamond Rios anymore when we listen to music, right? We use our iPhones and iPods and everything else.
Wait, you guys don't?
You don't use a Diamond Rio? The first product to market isn't always the one that we use, but you know, you've got microphones in the Google Nest product now. You know, you've got Alexa all over the place. You've got all the voice assistants. I think you're going to start to see more and more. I think you're going to start to see more of the voice assistants take user control, probably with the mobile phone docking first. You know, like the Cortana button on somebody that you know, on one of the systems, and I think you're going to start to see a lot more of that, as I said, this year, because people want it. They're afraid to play with anything else.
It's rare that I actually even add my own opinion into things, so it's weird.
We love having your opinion.
Not on this stuff. Trust me. You don't want 100% of it, but it's, you know, one of the things on the UCC side that is absolutely positively integral part of it, and we don't look at it enough, we meaning an AV industry, is the mobile component of what we do. Okay. I think it's a disregard on our part that we don't look at that as a component, because I will be the first person to walk into a room and say, this is my model for everything that I want to do for you.
Sure.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if I'm working for a manufacturer, if I'm working for an integrator, that's common ground for everybody, right? I work for a manufacturer. We need an app. The app has to be, you know, an app is part of our discussions. If I'm an integrator, this could be my touch panel, or this could be integrated into the room as my brain.
It's your touch panel, your control of the world. It's your personal device. Absolutely.
Exactly.
A lot of things are going to go in that direction.
And part of that future, you know, when looking at the future of where UCC space is, this is the most personal thing that you have right now. Everybody's user screen is different. You customize it yourself because you know how to do that. It's a challenge with, you know, with programmers. Like, everybody wants to add a personalize into touch panels, and God knows you're gonna kill me, you know, with the GUI conversation. But this is our own personal GUI. This is what we make what we do on a daily basis, which makes it comfortable. It makes sense that this becomes part of the conference room going down that IoT path.
Well, you've got that now in some products to begin with, like you know, the one of the interactive whiteboards by one of the manufacturers. It immediately pairs, and then your controls are on here. You know, think about this AI piece. Let's say we're having a conference with 10 people. I'm the first guy that walks into the room. It's my conference. I say, hey, start my meeting, whatever the wake word is, and the meeting starts. And we're having a meeting. But then I want to say something to Ann here privately, so I'm going to want to mute the microphone in front of me. Do I say, hey, mute the microphone in front of me so I can talk to Ann? That'd never be a voice command. There's got to be some secondary control, which will probably be this. You know, make it louder, make it softer. Maybe you would say that out loud. Add somebody to the meeting. Of course, you would say that out loud. But the mute mic, there are some controls that need to be on a personal basis.
And another thing that I have to bring back, because I think people will kill me if it's not brought up or at least noted. You guys are very good at the communication piece on the. I keep referring to you guys, and don't
right.
you know, everybody's got their collars undone right now. You very much, you know, are at the center of what is going on in the UCC space. But if I don't bring up the fact that, you know, one of the important things to this whole conversation is audio.
Absolutely.
And without audio, this goes
You have
away.
no meeting.
You're a moving picture.
Right.
Right?
You saw I had to walk off to change my microphone.
Exactly. I think that, you know, as this space develops, you know, the things like the beamforming microphones are making it a better space.
Sure.
I think improvement in audio. One of the things that irks me, because I was off to the side when you guys were talking about collaboration boards, right? And I'm sure they'll probably ping the people that are watching on Zoom. One of the tough things about collaboration boards itself is the audio, or the all-in-one boards, is the audio experience, right? Cameras are limited in how far that they can pick up. You know, some do great, you know, digitizing of how things can be picked up. Audio's tough from that front because, for one, they're very thin. These monitors are getting thin. You know, the physics of it. You can't rely on just the monitor, right? I think that audio is going to play a much more important piece as far as, you know, I had rooms built, right? Integrator design, consultant design, where the audio was strictly coming from a sound bar.
Well, you're seeing more and more of those. You're seeing more of the manufacturers getting into the space of providing a front of room sound bar, beamforming microphone, mic array with some speakers on it and the camera built in. And that's a great solution to an 8 or maybe 10-person conference room, as long as the camera zooms.
You have it in now. So take it back to the manufacturers.
That's my job.
Cut those room sizes down. Let's be real, right? Because the guy in the front or the lady in the front that's sitting at front can hear it awesome, or if you jack it up, they're going to get blasted. So there's got to be a better way to get the audio to the back of the room than just from that sound bar.
Yeah, I've never understood, and this goes through my entire career, and I've presented on this as well. We build a conference room. This is before video. What do? We put a speakerphone in the middle of the table. We put the speakerphone in the middle of the table. 30 people come into the room. The people at the ends of the table and say they can't hear the meeting. So what do? We add extension microphones. I have never understood that. Why do we add more mics if the people at the ends of the table can't hear the meeting? The whole concept of what we've done, it just doesn't make sense. That's all got to change. But it is changing because the programming built into those systems, like the one that, you know, my company builds, you know, the acoustic fence and the noise block, you know, so if you get the barking dog or somebody rustling food or something like that, it automatically ducks and mutes it out. It is starting to get smarter and better with AI. The camera we were talking about, there are tons of sound bars out there, but if the camera is a fixed focal length camera, it will get a nice picture up to a certain extent, and then you're dead. Forget it, because conference and collaboration is about facial expressions. If you can't see my expression, there's no point having the video call. Let's just do the audio call. Now you're getting EPTZ cameras, again, from the one that, you know, my organization's doing, where you know, one person talks, takes a shot of that person. So Do you have noise block, an acoustic fence, or some other type of noise control capabilities? Do you have a camera that can frame a shot if there's only one person in the room? This is where the AI, it's not just voice control, this is where it's going to be smart. Are you smart enough to know that the person's talking there, the beamforming mic's going to pick up there, and all the other ones are going to be off? There's a difference between form factor and the intelligence in the box.
But let me step back. And the stepping back is you need to set the level of expectations in the minds of the users, explaining to them what works and what doesn't. Perfect example. You have a lot of people who get into the middle of a meeting. All of a sudden at the last minute, the C-level says, can't be there. I'll call you from my cell phone. Call from the cell phone in their car as they're driving on the highway to get into the meeting. Pass a truck. The audio has now degraded to the entire meeting. Nobody bothered to ever say to that C-level, sorry you can't be here. Could you at least stay someplace that we could have you involved from an audio perspective? You're not going to be able to hear. We can't hear you. And I get more users who say to me, if they'd only told me if I sat closer or if I didn't do certain things, my audio would be better. They wait until they get into a meeting and people start complaining before they then say we've got an audio problem.
As somebody who used to spend, I spent a portion of my career on site, we couldn't control. The biggest thing was we couldn't control what that person was calling in on.
Of course.
You could call in on a $10 Kmart phone or the world's most expensive cell phone.
But the users will tell you,
it's my
no,
fault.
but yes,
It was
the
my
users will
fault.
say to you, you never told us what the limitations were.
Yeah.
You never said to us, don't take your cell phone and go out. I mean, I had one, as I said earlier, in another instance where their audio stopped working. So they all thought if they opened their cell phones and called in, that's audio. And the call was just horrendous, beyond usable as a result of what they were trying to do. So
we
you
can't-
need to
can't
step
control every
back.
detail.
You can't, but you need to step back and tell the users what works and what doesn't and why. Because then they'll know, oh, I really can't do that. I got to call somebody in to fix the problem. My trying to fix the problem does nothing. Or when my C-level says, I'm going to be leaving, I'm not attending your meeting, nobody bothers to say to the C-level, we're going to have to postpone the meeting. Or we're going to all have to go on an audio call, not to try it, to do it through a video call.
Well, that's always been, content has always been more important than quality. You know, when the first telepresence systems came out, they said that if you can't connect the telepresence system to an old video conferencing system because it would degrade the telepresence experience. Do you care if the telepresence experience is degraded if the person connecting is the CEO from his boat?
You know
don't
what,
care. You want the
hold
content, not
on,
the
hold on.
quality.
You know what degraded the teleconferencing experience? Stadium seating. Okay? Telepresence fell apart in my book the minute that it went from 6 people sitting in a perfectly acoustic shaped space across, we got these big freaking monitors in front of us right now. I felt like
Sure.
we were there, right? That was the immersive part. The minute you started adding the event seating and the participation, how is that giving you the immersive feel? And everybody, regardless of what company it was getting into that. Oh, now we have a second tier, stadium seating, and that works in movie theaters. It wasn't working in telepresence. That, to me, was the moment that telepresence jumped the shark, for those of you who know what that means. That's the minute that I completely lost faith in that. The quality was there. Once you added that piece, it changed. And then something crazy happened. The quality of the internet, quality of people's service at home jumped.
Sure.
Around that same time, it was the death bell for telepresence because now the quality was getting
The
better.
exchanges didn't need to be there with the ungodly costs that they were, and some of those companies are almost out of business at this
The
point.
proprietariness of it. Right. You know what? There's still a place for that. I'm sure government loves those closed network, tight little spaces with walls that don't have sheetrock to keep everything up and open and blah, blah, blah. But to me, those telepresence rooms, man, were the hottest flash in the pan that I've seen come and go. I mean, it was in, and a year later, it was out.
Well, no, not a year later, but if you go back, and I have it on my danto.info page if anybody wants to look at it. If you go look at the article that we did for God, I don't remember the publication's name, in 2006 when telepresence came out.
Yep.
We called it The Emperor Had No Clothes. We said, look, this doesn't make sense building a car that has no steering wheel that you can only drive to 3 places. Why in the world would you want to do that? Because it's a better experience? Fine. That's not going to fly.
Okay.
It took 5 years, but we were proven right in all of that.
I mean, I'm going to pick at your video conferencing historian capabilities. here.
Absolutely.
Was that not the original video conference system, like the old Pierce Phelps thing, where you had to have an operator who connected the calls for you in the back room, you know, and it was like plugging away, like, you know, things you see on history pictures. I mean, that was the original video conferencing back in the day, right? So I want to switch gears. There's a lot of hot topics coming across.
Sure.
What we're getting here. I'll tell you right now, we're gonna probably get into a discussion about Mobile World Conference that's happening right now in Barcelona. There's a lot of conversation, buzz.
Nothing
about
important is going to be happening in Barcelona in the next few years.
Nothing. Thank God it's finally getting on the map. Right?
Okay, hold on. Before you do that, I want you to change gears. But what I'm going to do is post into the Twitter chat right now a link to the article I was just talking about called Telepresence, a background and analysis that goes beyond the hype, which was published in World Commerce Review, Volume 1, Issue 2 in January 2008. While everybody else was saying, do it, do it, do it, myself and we at the IMCCA were saying, hold on a second. This doesn't smell right.
You're doing your best, Frankie. Please relax. Don't do
we
it.
were proving right. So I'm going to
That's
post
awesome.
this into there because it's important that everybody understands that while you have a lot of organizations in the industry that are pushing the hype,
Yeah.
we're the ones out there saying, no, wait, stop, think about this. And I'm proud of that.
So we're definitely going to get back to we're going to get into the Mobile World Conference, what's coming out there, because anything that we're talking about today has a lot future tentacles going into 5G. I would love to hear your take where it's going. I'm sure people online will also want to get some of that as well. So Mobile World Conference, and the other hot take that I got here. What happens when my screen is going like this, and I can't keep up with what's going on here.
None of us can.
Let's get into Mobile World Conference. What is the significance to AV? Okay, and this is not a question about our industry. Why is it significant that we pay attention to what's coming out of Barcelona this week?
This is the conversation that Adrian and I had at CES. If you, I don't know if you saw that video, if we talked about it, we talked about it online. Why does an AV guy need to go to CES? Why does an AV guy need to go to Mobile World Conference? Why does an AV guy need to do anything other than maybe show up at Infocom, see the people he knows, stay in his lane? Because collaboration isn't staying in a lane. Collaboration is going to be, you know, the voice control on the phone that I showed you. Collaboration is going to be, you know, terrific story to talk about this. I had to do a call with a colleague over a technology system that's proprietary now, and I don't want to call out any one particular manufacturer. I was in the boardroom of a large organization on Thursday, in the boardroom, all the technology surrounding me. And I took that call by propping my phone up against the touch panel and doing it on my phone over LTE perfectly. So what were the problems? The problem is that system is so proprietary, I can't get in an expensive room. But I now have.
You know what, David? I'm going to play devil's advocate. There's no picture. It didn't happen. Just want to. It's the internet, man. You know, Abe Lincoln said everything on the internet's true. So let's keep it in perspective.
But I was able to take the call with high quality video over my simple iPhone, leaned up against the table over LTE. When that becomes 5G, when I can download a movie in a minute, when I can have that kind of high quality, are we really going to be worrying about what kind of internet we have in the office, or bringing the wires over, or is everything going to start to become mobile? Are we going to create these little mobile stations that you drop into a conference room and then they become the video conference system? You know, they're a lot of it's going to be changing. So the ability for that, the ability for sensors to be, all the equipment to be talking to each other over a 5G network is also going to be changing a lot of that. I don't think it's going to be quick, but I think that anybody who calls themselves a technologist needs to be aware of all of this stuff. And, you know, Barcelona is going to be talking about the future of 5G. We saw at CES that four manufacturers claimed that they were all going to have the first 5G product out there. So one of the manufacturers had a product that already said 5G, even though it wasn't. But, you know, they wanted to say that they were first. You're going to see a lot of talking about flippable screens. You know, the new Samsung Fold phone. How much did that price come out for?
$2 grand.
$2 grand. You know, does anybody want to pay $2 grand for a phone?
I'm still trying to. How am I going to hold a phone that's now square? Is my first when it's open.
Well, you hold it like this, but when you put it down, it opens up to be a tablet. Is that useful? Yes. Is that $2 grand useful? Nah.
I had clamshells back in the day. I've never had a clamshell in which I flipped over to clamshell and it was ergonomic. So I have my doubts about that.
That's
But
why
anyway,
I didn't switch to the
But
larger
back to your
phone because I
question.
want the thumb.
please, he's
But
going off. He's
Your
going to get
question
angry.
is, why should an AV person care?
Yes.
And my answer is because a lot of the technology you use as AV has become network capable. And so you'd better learn that network interface and the capability of that, aside from the fact all these people going to all these events are on airplanes, reading airplane magazines, and getting information that says this is the next greatest thing I have to do. They're going to come back to you at the office and say, Chris, I just read about this, or somebody emailed me about it. Let's look into it.
6 months after Nest debuted in the house, I had an executive ask me, can I get one in my office?
Exactly.
I'm like, oh my God, that's not even.
And you know, you go to the point of the consumer. The consumer phone started with the consumer end of it more than the business end of it. So that's why you need to be aware. That's why you need to go to
David's
these.
just being grumpy. I'm not going to ask him this.
Grumpy?
I'm going to ask.
I'm as happy
gonna
as I've been in years. Before you ask your question,
Yes.
let's take a look at that one. That comes in from my friend Manish Parmar, talking about how much instruction is too much instruction when we're talking about adoption of use.
Oh, that's very easy to answer. That depends on the user. And I use the analogy of 20% of people are techies who want to do everything they can to see if they can break it, let alone use it. 20% of the people, no matter how much instruction you give them, will never get it. And it's the other 60% in the middle that you have to worry about.
And my theory around all of that is, if you can't push on a string or a rope and have it work effectively. My answer is that you set up a meeting with champions, one representing each of the groups that you have in your organization, and you ask them, what do you need? What do you like? What systems do you want? What is going to work? You, and I hate to say this way, but it's all internal and amongst the family, you make them think it's their idea. You can't get them to use your idea, but if it was their idea collectively, then now they're going to go out and say, hey, look at this new system. I helped design it. We helped put it in. You got to try it. I'm using it for my meeting. That's the way you build that instruction. Sure, you have a website that you can go to, and place where people can answer a quick question.
Yep.
You know, how do I turn on? What do I do? That has to be in the background. But adoption comes from, generically growing it amongst the champions.
But let me add to that, because I think the adoption point is also important from the standpoint of you think you've done it all. And I get this complaint all the time from the vendors who I say, you have to promote, you have to train, you have to educate. And they say, we do, and nobody gets it. They're going to learn at different rates. So if you find your big issue, and this is just an example, is that somebody's forgetting to unmute the mute button, send an email out to everybody saying, remember to unmute the mute button. Doesn't have to be a whole nother training session.
You guys are super, super, super professional on how you guys answer that. Honestly, I have debated this, and I've said this to a couple people. I think that the best way to train or to instruct going forward is at the time or during the year when you have your bring your kid to work day.
Yep.
You bring the kids to work. Put them in your most sophisticated conference room. If they can't figure it out, your audience won't figure it out.
Well, that's probably true. But the other thing we used
bring your kids to work. Let them play with it. Because if you're not designing a system that's simple enough that a 12, 15, or 16-year-old cannot walk in and do it, it's incredible how that goes. I've shown my kids what a touch panel is. And then I tell them, what would you do to touch to get on a video call? And even the nomenclature, far end, near end, they're like, what the heck is that? Right? In one button press, they're in a video call. Take advantage of these, it's not a support group. What would I call them? Your test group. Bring your test group in, and
Sure.
these young kids.
And I'm going to tell you have a wrong test group. That's one test group. The other test group is your grandmother.
Yeah.
You need to bring the other end in because we're still dealing.
Please don't teach
Don't
them
teach
how.
them-
Don't
no.
teach them how to FaceTime.
No, but let me explain to you why you need to do
not
that.
cool. Man.
Our C levels, we still have a lot of C levels that are not technology centric.
Mhm.
And if they're the ones that are writing the checks for the money, you need to make sure that they also find it easy to use.
You know what? I think the C level, even though they're still writing the checks for the money, I think that they are plugging it down with their finger. It's hard. The conversations that an IT company has to have with those C-level executives to get funding for these projects is getting very easy. You can't hold back the the iPhone
But
coming in.
not
You
the
can't
point
hold
of the
back
funding,
the-
Chris. The point on the usability of it. Yes, I funded it, but am I now going to drive the usage in my organization because I'm willing to use it?
They
And
still
the
got-
answer is lots of times no.
how many CEOs have flip phones still?
Oh, there are a number.
Or still have a BlackBerry? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
It's almost to the point where they're just going with it and are getting, the team in place that's basically saying, hey, this is the change. This is the trend. This is what you're paying people for.
Well,
You are paid as a CEO to run a
history
business.
again. History again. You
Okay.
got to keep going back to history. In the 1970s and maybe the early 1980s, manufacturers built gear for corporations. They built expensive computers. They built all these things. And after they were installed in the corporations, that's when they figured out, well, maybe there's a consumer play to this, and then the consumers would get it at home. Your first IBM AT PC, all that stuff started in the office, and then it came home.
Now it's the reverse.
Now it's the opposite. Now things are built for the mass consumer market.
Mhm.
And they expect that if they make a product so popular like the iPhone, it will force its way into the enterprise. And that's what
and
happens.
that's what's been happening.
So the C-level guy is using a flip phone only if he's using a flip phone in his personal life. If he gets a beautiful flat panel TV, if he gets one of the new OLED, Ultra HD TVs, he's going to watch that at home. He's going to walk into his office saying, why do these things look like garbage? He's going to know that he can pick up his phone and he can do a FaceTime with his kids, and then he walks into the conference room and he's trying to figure out, well, why do I have to have somebody program something that I can just do on my phone? This doesn't come with an instruction manual. The consumerization is now driving this, and the whole UC and AV industry needs to adopt into it. I've said this for forever. Touch panel programming is dead. It's a dead art. Come up with a standard that works just like all of the phones do, and get out of the business. It was a boondoggle for way too long.
3 topics that have hit since we've talked. We got to go into the university space, and what part does unified communication talk to the colleges and universities?
Sure.
Aging in place.
The equipment or the people?
The idea. Video conferencing plays a big part in the medical world,
Absolutely.
and in the point where, for example, I have my father-in-law lives 30 minutes, 40 minutes from my house, right? He's not there yet, but there has been some questions regarding his memory. The installation of an Amazon Echo with the video
Or
is now
Facebook's Portal or any of the other products.
has now taken aging in place without having to put him in a place in a home,
Right.
whatever. It's allowing him to live in his space with constant communication, and it's all a matter of drop in on so and so, and it's focused on his chair that he sits on 90% of the day, just to have that conversation. How's it going? How's everything going? As a matter of fact, it's bizarre use of that. Alexa talks to him. Part of the thing with dementia or getting to the point where you're losing your memory is to constantly be active with your brain. You have to exercise it.
Somebody has to online post the spoof of Amazon Alexa for old people that Saturday Night Live did a couple of years ago.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
So video
find that.
conferencing becomes a part of that. If you would have told me 10, 15 years ago that a little device would be in my grandfather's place, that would have been out of control. So we got education, we got the medical or the aging in place conversation. We speak a lot about corporate here because obviously this is where we understand our business well. Will there be a crossover as well from the residential side? One of the things that I've always questioned or wondered was everybody's very mobile. There's never been any focus on the home office as the workers become more remote, right?
Well, I just
So these are topics that have been brought up that we.
I've been doing a home office for 37 years. Now, I started in this technology in '74 before there really was anything but a conference phone.
Exactly. What was in your office in I'm going to
In
ask you.
'74, it was in my office was a phone. There wasn't video.
Fast forward to the 80s. What was in your office? A fax machine entered that space?
Fax machine was in the office.
Personal
phone,
computer.
Personal computer, a phone.
Uh-huh.
That was about it. Now, then what started happening in the later '80s, as the PictureTels of the world came out, I got systems sent to me left and right.
But how would you do that out of your house when the home internet wasn't. I mean, we're talking
ISDN.
hotline.
ISDN.
ISDN.
So you
I
had-
ISDN.
I had
Absolutely.
ISDN.
Can we just preface that? Very expensive ISDN at the
It was,
time
but-
was per minute.
Well, when I was working for Bloomberg,
Mhm.
I was responsible for all of the broadcasting, all of the video, all the radio networks, all the radio stations. I had in my house the ability to monitor and check everything. And in fact, it's a funny story. I used to have a silence alarm on like 5 channels in my basement. And I'd be having coffee with my wife and a guest, and the alarm would go off, and we'd wait about 3 or 4 seconds because there might just be silence in there. If the silent alarm kept going, everybody knew I was excusing myself. I was now at work, and I had to figure out why something went off the air. So it's a true story.
It's like a safe room.
It's a
Yeah.
true
You got
story.
a panic room for
Right.
you. There you go.
So and they were great silence sets. Roller made them, really terrific products. But anyway, if you cut to now, and everybody knows, I mentioned before that I've just started a new job with Plantronics
Yes.
Polycom. I was onboarded. Now I know they're a technology company, but still, I was onboarded as a remote worker. That was not a surprise to anybody in the HR department. That was not a surprise to anybody in the organization. They don't need an office for me. They don't need a desk for me. They don't need to pay for HVAC for me. They don't need to pay for electricity for me. They don't need to pay for any of that for me. I get it at home. Do I get a stipend for maybe some of the using technology? Possibly, but I'm not going to charge my company for internet that's already at 75 meg that I'm already paying for myself so my kids can play games. It's not a cost factor anymore like it was with ISDN. Now I have the video capability, I have the voice capability, I have the phone, I have multiple systems, multiple capabilities. Onboarding remote workers is now standard in corporate America because they can get somebody who isn't in the city where the building is, who's the best person for the job. It opens up tons of possibilities.
Is commercial UC companies marketing to the remote worker?
You're seeing more and more. There's an organization that I provided a video for called Remote How. There are I don't think the manufacturers are manufacturing and marketing to the remote worker. The manufacturers are manufacturing and marketing to the companies that they can enable remote workers. Part of it is how do you enable remote workers securely? How do you make sure that there's no man in the middle interception between any of the communication? How do you make sure that it's going to be stable, that it's going to work? There are a lot of pieces to that.
Well, and the other piece that you add to this today, especially, is we're all working not only from offices, but from our home or on the road all the time.
Mhm.
So you don't, just because it's 5 o'clock doesn't mean you go home and turn off everything.
Trust me, I know.
And I've
So
How does Sunday at 9:47?
oh, Sunday at 6:15.
Sunday at 4 a.m. when I got up. But
This
no,
isn't
I've-
work. It's fun, ladies and gentlemen.
I've tweeted about this too. I am the I don't want to use that term because it might be derogatory. I am the example of the omni-channel remote worker. I'm sitting at my desk when I'm not out at a client or traveling. I am looking at my work computer. I am looking at Microsoft Teams. I am looking at Microsoft Skype for Business. I have Zoom open in case somebody's trying to get me on Zoom. I have my home phone. I have my work phone. I'm monitoring Twitter. I'm monitoring LinkedIn. I'm monitoring Facebook. If you and I are going to communicate anything offline, I'm not sure why. We're communicating as Twitter messages.
Mhm.
If I'm going to communicate anything with Ann, it had typically been by phone and email, but this week, since we have collaboration week coming up, she started
been
texting
texting
me
each
on
other.
SMS. So I need to be available on multiple platforms. I still have, Cisco WebEx Teams on my phone. I have my former colleagues talking to me on Cisco WebEx Teams. There is no one answer. The novice
Well, now I'm
home
not-
worker,
You know what? I needed an answer, and you're not going to give me just one.
it's everything. It's everything. We are in an omni-channel world right now.
We
Thank
didn't say easy.
It's not. It's never.
No.
It's never going to be easy.
The hard part was when I posted my job change on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, God, do I hate it. It prompts people to congratulate you. I appreciate all the good words, but the next time LinkedIn asks you to do something, wish so-and-so a happy job anniversary, give so-and-so, don't. Please don't. I don't need 500 messages going into my LinkedIn account, filtering through somebody who actually is trying to reach out to me. I appreciate your congratulations. But so, I mean, it's a dumb platform because it's trying to promote the use of it, and it's noise. But
Let's
Well,
go on to
like-
your let's
like
go
I- like
on
I
to your
said.
medical one.
Grumpy.
Yes.
Grumpy day. I called it. Called me
Do
a
I look
futurist.
grumpy?
I knew. Well, you got to play the role of the villain. That's what we're doing. You got to be. You got to be
devil's
the bad guy.
advocate. I'll take devil's advocate.
Okay, I wanted
speak for the
the
users.
mustache twirling type of guy,
We
but I don't
speak
get
for
that.
the users.
give us the medical
Tron.
question. Yes.
Well, I think the medical question becomes, how can the medical community communicate information from their staff, physicians, et cetera, to the general public, and vice versa?
Mhm.
How can we do more communication two-way instead of one-way? And how can we take our patients and be able to see them in their own environments, making them more comfortable? One of the things that precipitated this was lack of space. I can't tell you the number of people I've talked with recently who went to an emergency room or the hospital and it took them hours to find a bed.
Mhm.
And the other big issue I've heard from a lot of the medical people is the increase in supergerms, wanting to get people out of a medical environment and back in their home environment because they heal better there and because they're less apt to get a supergerm. So I think the kind of issue you're dealing with your father, of being able to communicate with somebody and keep them in their own environment that they like and are comfortable with, is huge. The issue all the medical people said to me for years is they were dealing with the government, Medicare, Medicaid, et cetera, being willing to reimburse them to be able to see a patient that didn't physically come to the environment.
Remote
That's
diagnostics are here.
starting to get better in every single state so that they can get reimbursed.
And by no means am I a HIPAA specialist or somebody who
Nor am I.
understands that. But from a technology perspective, remote diagnostics are increasing. I see that as beneficial. I think that a lot of this research that went into, remote diagnostics and remote medical came from, from countries that didn't have the accessibility.
Correct.
And I
There's
remember
a lot of it going on in Canada for years, where people were, very far away from the closest provider, so they would provide it. It hadn't been in the U.S. for the longest time because of, frankly, how litigious we are and how many people wanted to do that. But you're starting to see it more in California. It's a state-by-state thing where you can actually, take a phone and take a picture of something, and then you get some diagnostics over that. Telemedicine, there's Teledoc, and a few of the other ones out there right now. Where the insurance companies, which we're all dealing with, don't want you going to urgent care. The urgent care centers have popped up all the time. You pay 20, 50, whatever the copay is, they're paying hundreds of dollars for that. And you're going to urgent care just because you need an antibiotic prescribed or a cream. If you use the teleservice, it costs a lot less. So now the insurance company's trying to push you to use that teleservice so they don't have to reimburse the urgent care centers.
Believe it or not, just a quick story. One of the best uses of augmented reality that I've seen was being done by companies that were pioneering augmented reality for how to train people how to draw blood for blood sampling in remote areas. So you would put on these goggles. It's amazing. You can't get running water, but you can get service.
Sure.
And you put on the goggles and they train you how to look for the veins and how to do that. I think that's incredible. That's an incredible story to tell on the use of AR. So I'm sorry, I digressed from the
telehealth, I think, for AR and VR is probably going to be one of the biggest pieces. One of the things that I saw recently, and putting on goggles and pretending to ride in a roller coaster is cool, but that's not a very mass market application. I saw somebody with some glasses that had microphones on them. Part of that is you could ask Alexa a question and you would see the answer there. But part of it is for people that are hearing impaired, that you're getting speech to text visual while somebody's talking, in your eye. It's like, wow, that's a really good use.
So I have a fun question for you, because I know you were at CES years ago and you've been going for years. Was Google Glass ahead of its time and not ready for what I think is going to come with that? I mean, you're speaking of cool things like that. Google was the first marketed.
I'm kind of on the fence about that. I mean, the people got Google Glass because it was hard to get, so they were wearing it as status symbols. We called those people glass holes. They were the ones that were walking around with this stuff just because they thought that they could.
You heard that? Right?
You've known some. I've known some.
Okay.
That's what we call them.
So you're equating it to it was the Fire Festival of
something like
eyewear. Okay.
From a technology standpoint, it was the Newton. I don't know if you guys remember the Apple Newton, but it's like, were we going to be using something like this, and use it? Yes. Was it ready?
Newton the first foldable phone?
No, Newton was the Apple. It was the first throw-outable phone. and Steve Jobs, before he passed away, said we would never use a stylus. And now they have a stylus that they use with the tablet. So
for $100, you can have a stylus.
Exactly. But anyway, I think It was an it was a solution searching for a problem.
Yes.
And I think all of AR and VR is a solution searching for a problem. But I think when you actually find those applications, I think it's useful. And you know, to take that exact conversation and bring it a little bit back to, you know, the video conferencing and telepresence market. Think about CES 2, 3, 4 years ago, and not Infocom 2, 3, 4 years ago, telepresence robots. You know, they've even been on television. There was jokes rolling around the office building with the iPad in front of it going around. I've said for years that when I left CES, when I left Infocom, all the demos that we saw of the telepresence robots, of the 4, 5, 6 companies that did it, were all they would ever have to build for their lifetime. You know, is there an application for somebody to go to school, you know, for some child that's disabled? Yeah. How many of those do we need in the world? 100? We occasionally put products, my firm included, we occasionally put products out on the market that are really good, thinkable, you know, conversation pieces, but they don't have a mass application. And we need to be smarter about that going forward. We need to build products that meet needs, not build products looking for needs.
All right, I like them. I thought they were interesting.
Well,
it was a great way on the industrial side, coming as a manufacturer. Not then, I was working for a pharmaceutical, where you can actually physically go down the line and look.
Or dock in a box.
Yeah.
Put the, you know, roll the dock down the hall in front of a patient's bed. I had it happen to me in a hospital.
Yeah, I kind of like that. To each has his own opinion about that, but hey, you know, I'll be the flip side to your poo-pooing the idea.
That's
As
fine.
you
It's all
say,
good.
Grumpy Dave this morning.
That's it. But
Oh my
you know,
God, I'm not going to live that one down, huh?
It's Sunday, it's 10 a.m. Why not? There are a bunch of other questions. I'm just going to take.
Well, Teresa, I like that. Agile workforce. We don't want to call them remote workers. We want to call them an agile workforce. I like that term.
I'm the least.
I'm going to
agile-
steal
I just
that one.
wanna
Thank you,
point out that
Teresa.
I'm the least agile person.
Is Teresa still here? We're going to get her on camera to say hi?
I'll stumble. I
Okay,
will.
fine.
I will stumble out of here and prove that I am the least agile AV person in the world.
Okay.
So I'm going to step away. I'm going to let one of the guys come back in. And thank you.
All right, we're
there's
probably going to,
questions.
I think we're probably going to go for like another half hour,
Yep,
I
have
think.
to be out
you
of
know?
here by 10:30.
Something like that, or another 15 minutes. We'll do it until we're not bored anymore. Or they're not
Or
bored
they're not
anymore.
bored.
Yeah,
I'm not worried
exactly.
about us.
They're definitely bored. You can tell. You can tell that they're bored. But anyway, thank you. If guys, for people that are watching on the Zoom call, I'm stepping away, but I'm not stepping away from the computer, obviously. Send me your calls. Send me your questions. I got one sitting here from Ryan Tarrant regarding UC. Can I leave you with the question? that was
Absolutely.
brought up?
Sure.
As more UC options become available, I've noticed the expectation of people, and where's Teresa, because she could probably answer this better too, the expectation of people being available. This has led to people's attention becoming even more split from attending meetings in open offices to literally attending 2 meetings at once. Has technology basically made us omnipresent, I guess? We have to be in multiple places at once, and whatever happened to the 9 to 5? Now, granted, not everybody follows that 9 to 5 mantra, but have
All right,
we?
so let me address some of those things.
You address that. I'm going to step away,
Okay.
and you guys battle that out.
Okay, so I'm a firm believer that work is what you do, not where you go.
Correct.
And you have the ability to communicate all the time. Let's let Teresa step in, then I'll finish answering that
Poor
question.
Teresa doesn't even have the question. Or first we commented about your agile workforce, and you're going to need a mic.
You're picking up from here, right?
No, he wants it picked up there. So
Okay.
yes.
Why don't you just introduce yourself, and then we'll talk about some of that agile workforce and answer Chris's question.
Sure. Good morning. I'm Teresa Hahn, VP of Marketing and Business Development for Verrex. And I asked an interesting question.
You did.
So what are we talking about? Which question are we
Well,
referring to?
Chris was just asking if there's too much technology, if it's driving us crazy, if we're online too often, if there's too much going on. Are we working today? That's
Well,
a really
you
good
talked about
question.
the agile workforce as well.
Before we get into that, I'm going to ask you a question. It's Sunday morning. It's in the East Coast. It's about 10 a.m. right now. Are we working?
Yes.
Yes,
I would not be doing
agree.
this if I were home. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting doing this kind of a thing. This is work.
I don't know.
I think it blends itself, right?
Right.
I mean, what we do today is not necessarily defined by home life and work life. It's all combined. So I
Right.
see this is a little bit of both,
It
actually.
is a little bit of both. So I don't feel so bad if Monday morning I've got a dentist appointment for 2 hours, or if it's parent-teacher day and I need to take 3 or 4 hours. The trick to what Chris's question was, in my opinion, is calendaring. Is you have to calendar your life. My wife and kids know that, and it might sound a little strict, but it's like, if it's not on my calendar, I'm not doing it, because I want to make sure that I'm managing this. So if I need to travel somewhere, if I need to go shopping, if I need to, if I'm going to go get tickets and see a Broadway show, it's on my calendar. If I'm getting a text message or an email at 11 p.m. from a colleague in Asia, am I going to say, well, I'm not at work until 9 a.m. the next morning, and then I'm going to reply to him at 9 a.m., and it's going to wait the next 24-hour cycle for him to get into the office and get the answer? I'm being rude.
That depends if you're up at 11 p.m.
Well, that's the point. If you're available.
Right.
If I get that message, I'm going to answer it in real time in the evening. I don't care if I'm at home. If he's asking me, can you give me a report on XYZ? If I don't have it, I don't have it. But if I can give him a quick answer. So the idea of a work-life balance, if done correct, is left to the agile worker to decide. When do you want to be available? Do you want to be available off hours? Do you want to be looking at messages on vacation? Some people say, never, I'm off the grid. I'm not one of those guys. I don't want to come back being off the grid after a week and then have all this stuff pile on me. I want to check it every once in a while. So I manage it to where I'm comfortable, which gives me the flexibility of managing my personal time if I want to go do something or take some time off or do a family. And
Here's
it's that
the problem.
trade-off.
The problem are those organizations who say, and I still see it, you work from 9 to 5. If I don't see you at your desk from 9 to 5, you're not working. And I still get those with customers who say, you are signed contractually to be here from 9 to 5 with a lunch break. Do I think they're realistic? No, I think they're crazy. I think the firms that are really getting it are firms like one my daughter's working for now, where you manage your own time. As long as you get the job done,
Exactly.
we don't care whether you do it in the middle of the night if you're a night owl.
But you're assuming equality for all positions. So you're
When they're
assuming,
not,
like,
true.
right? So some people have the flexibility where they can determine their own hours, and we can answer an email or text in the middle of the night for Hong Kong, and then come in late the next day. But there are a number of workers that are using the same technology we're using, but they don't have that luxury. So I think there's also an issue of equality in terms of how different workers work and how they're expected to work.
Well, and there's some jobs you have to be there 9 to 5.
Exactly.
And then the other question that Chris asked was about the deluge of different technologies. I think we're a little weird. I think everybody in this room can call themselves a technologist to one degree or another, that we know we need to be familiar with a lot of different things that are going on. So I'm not suggesting that everybody be looking at, Facebook Messenger and LinkedIn chat and text messages and everything else. I think the typical organization that isn't in the industry is going to have 1 or 2 or 3 channels. They're going to have their phone with their text messages. They might have a messenger or WhatsApp or some other type of application on it. They'll have what their company uses, whether it's Skype for Business or Microsoft Teams or Cisco Teams, and they'll have email. And they're going to have to figure out how to balance those to make them work. What kind of notifications? Again, if you use calendaring effectively, then for your free busy state is going to show that you're busy, not to be interrupted. You can go into do not disturb on a Skype for Business kind of thing, so nobody can interrupt you. If I'm attending a 2-hour briefing on something that I'm really not interested in that much anyway, but I needed to attend, I'll answer an instant message. But again, it leaves the option of doing that to the user. And it means that users that are good at this technology are going to be the ones that are going to make a lot of progress in the industry.
But do you think we here are better at the technology because it's our industry as
Yes.
opposed to our end users, that their focus, right, is pharmaceutical or consumer brands or another side? Do you feel like because we're in it on a daily basis, we're a lot more advanced than our end users are?
No, not necessarily. No.
Okay, good.
I think
Why?
in some cases, because I think there's some end users who get this, who embrace all of it, and who have an application within their business that they need to be really good at it. I think there are others who don't. And they'll use what they need at that point in time or what somebody suggested they use, but they're not going to become experts in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the concept of the digital native versus the digital immigrant comes into mind as well. Where children that are being born today Congratulations, Simon Dudley, on the birth of
Yes.
your son. Children that are being born today are already smarter than we are. They're already immersed in all this stuff. So guys that are my age and ladies have to work twice as hard to come up to speed to learn things that they're just adopting normally.
Right.
So I think you're getting that situation. I think you're getting it where people in the industry force themselves to work at it. Because what good would I be as an expert in the industry if somebody said, well, I've used this product, have you used it? It's like, oops, no, I've never used that. We have to do that. I don't think the typical end user does. I think the typical end user needs to immerse themselves in the technology they're using, but not necessarily all the technologies like we do. And, you know, it would be nice if someday all the manufacturers got around and held hands and sang Kumbaya, and you could call one from the other, and it wasn't 30 years later and we're still talking about interoperability. I'd love to see that day happen, but market forces will drive it.
Agreed.
Cool.
All right.
So, any other questions coming in from our panel? Mark Coxon says hi to you. Teresa,
Hey, Mark Coxon.
nice seeing you. I love this comment from Paul. The first to arrive to the office was the diligent worker in the old days, and the new way of being the diligent worker is the first to respond to an email.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So there are a lot of interesting things going on with that. I'm trying to see if there are any other questions from them. If not, we can kind of go into what haven't we talked about with Collaboration Week at this point. The closing cocktail party. There is still room to register if you go to collaborationweekny.org and go to the last event, the closing cocktail party, on the registration tab, being sponsored by Polycom at STK Downtown. So let me explain this to you in a way that you'll understand. Manhattan, free cocktails Wednesday night, industry people to network with. I can't think of a reason not to register. I'll be there.
I'll be there.
Tom, you're going to be there?
I'll be there.
Tom's going to be there. Teresa, you coming?
Of course.
There you go. See, I don't know why anybody wouldn't want to come if they're in the New York area, and it's still open. It's still got about 40 slots left. So,
Cocktails in this industry, that's like
And in Manhattan, no less.
and in Manhattan, yeah. So,
no validated parking.
no, you gotta take the train or Ubers or whatever into Manhattan. Maybe we can there's enough of us coming from Jersey. Maybe we can get a van and come home at night
Yeah,
or something.
that's
That'd be cool.
Get
Ride
someone to
share.
drive
One
us.
more thing to coordinate. You're out of your mind.
We didn't provide transportation in New York. That was too much to do, and we're counting on all the attendees to be smart enough to realize where they need to be, because there are no badges. We're not telling them. We're hoping that we have smart folks. So we talked about the cocktail party. We talked about the dinner. There's also a cocktail party Tuesday night at Oblong, but I think that one's full at this point. Cloud providers. We talked about the cloud a little bit. We haven't talked about cloud video. You can't spit without seeing an ad from Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
They're very popular, and a lot of people use them in the space. I don't think it costs anything to use Zoom. I mean, it does as an enterprise, but you can just log in and try it and
Yes,
start
you
to
can.
use it.
It's true.
You have a free account.
And that's starting to lead the trend, this freemium thing. Is that good for the industry? Is that good for a small startup that's trying to make money?
If it builds awareness and makes people try something that they haven't used before, I think it's great for the industry.
But who's not using video, right? So we have this conversation internally a lot from a video conferencing standpoint or video standpoint. If we have to convince someone they need video, they're not our client from a communication and collaboration standpoint. They're either too small or too behind the times. So
Now, here's where I think we need to convince them. We've got a lot of organizations, whether it's education or corporate, who have video. Somebody in the enterprise has decided they need video, but it doesn't mean that everybody within the organization is using video.
So that's where I agree with you. From a pervasiveness standpoint, Zoom has gotten video to a lot more
people,
employees
right.
than you have to go to a dedicated room to have video. You can do it from your desktop. So from
And they
that
made it
standpoint,
easy.
right, exactly. I completely agree
Right.
with that. And I think that's beneficial from that side. The more people using technology, to be honest, from an integration standpoint, it's a bit selfish. The more technology they want, the more
Right,
technology
exactly.
they need. So
the freebie idea
Right.
Zoom was
Sure.
supporting it is a good one, because the next thing they did on top of that is now they're going to come out with their own devices. So you like the Zoom experience? Now, if you really want a room or some kind of a device, we'll sell that to you as well. I mean, I think it was a strategic business decision on their part to do that. And I've had a couple of potential new vendors coming into the marketplace who've called me and said, we're going to follow the Zoom model.
Right.
How many manufacturers do you have that actually roll out a software solution and then come out with a hardware solution? Crazy bastards.
I'm not going to repeat that question.
You have to repeat the question without the end.
Yes, how many, go ahead, you want to repeat it?
No, I think you're better.
How
at
many
that.
manufacturers are coming out with a solution that they then sell hardware at the end of that solution?
Right. That's a great question.
Well, the idea is that, you know, you want to put Coke on the shelf, and then you want to put Diet Coke on the shelf, and then you want to put lemon Diet Coke, and then you want to put cherry Diet Coke, and then you want to put, you know, caffeine-free Coke. And the more products you have on the shelf, the less room there is for other products to compete with you on the shelf. That's the strategy that a lot of these manufacturers are using. They want to be the suite that you know, you can do everything with. At Enterprise Connect this year, I am sure you're going to see product announcements of people that are traditionally video products getting into the voice space. You're going to see announcements of people that are traditionally voice products getting into the video service space. You're going to see people trying to load the shelves with their product so that there's, you know, the pie doesn't get bigger. People want to have a bigger slice of it going forward.
Sure.
And I think that's just the strategy that everybody's using. So yeah.
That was part of my point for an earlier tweet. Like, at what point is this marketing? I mean, as an industry, we're a business. We have to make money. We have to keep reinventing ourselves from a product and solution standpoint. How much of it is actually tech-centric versus, you know, tech-centric what an end user wants versus what we're trying to sell? How does a manufacturer keep growing, creating new products? This is how they do it. It's not necessarily always applicable. You know, lime, orange, 7-Up isn't a big seller, but they still came out with it. So at what point do we look at it from a marketing standpoint as us as an industry versus a technology standpoint? I feel like it's a very fine line.
Well, it goes back to the first conversation we were having today, which was when do we get a seat at the table? When do we get into the conversation? If we can get into the conversation before products have been announced, before they've been chosen, then we can get real user needs and answer your question, to go in there from this is what you need to solve your problem. If you're being called in and said, you know, well, here, please give us a bid on these 20 pieces of equipment from these manufacturers, we just need an installer, you know, you're not going to be able to sit down at the table and ask why. When I worked with Dimension Data, I really tried to change the mindset of some of the client managers in Salesforce, that if somebody called, this is any manufacturer, I'm just using them as an example because I was there, when somebody calls the distributor, the integrator, and says, we would like to have 2 displays installed and 2 codecs installed, can you give me a price? Nobody is retiring quota. Nobody is selling. Nobody is solving their problem for their company selling a display and 2 codecs. The answer should have been no. Why? What problem are we trying to solve? I don't want to sell you the compact car if you really need to tow a trailer in the background. Let's get involved in the conversation as to why you need it. A lot of facilities people, a lot of building people didn't like that conversation. They just wanted to do their thing their way. You know what? That's not the future of the industry.
Well, and I dealt with some that didn't have any answer. Somebody above them said, order this. So they were doing that job. Now the goal was to get above them to find out why are we ordering that.
Exactly. So I think there's a lot of progress that we can make in this industry, but I think we're going to be determined, like I was talking about with Carterphone before. We're still going to make mistakes if we don't follow the history and realize what's needed. What's needed is an end user assessment, needs assessment. Figure out what the solutions are, install solutions that are interoperable internally and externally. Don't buy any solutions that are not interoperable internally and externally. Let the market forces get rid of all of those, walled gardens, and then move forward with unified communication into the future that actually really works.
And the one key piece on all of that is you've got to do some sort of a usage adoption approach with people.
Absolutely.
The complaint I get from the users we interview is we have no idea what technology is here. They're putting in new technology. They're not telling us that they've put it in. They're adding new facilities or rooms. We don't even know the rooms exist. So their complaint is we're not being communicated to.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, part of it, I feel like as an industry that we need to be better educated on workplace strategy. So as a company, Verrex focuses primarily on the corporate market. So we're about 80 to 90% corporate market focused. We have a portion of our time dedicated to understanding workplace strategy, the connection between technology, processes, and users. being better educated in that, I think gives us a better seat at the table, so that when we're having those discussions, we're not just saying, well, what's your goal, end user? We're saying, these are some of the things that our other clients are doing to enforce their goal workplace strategy, and this is what you should be doing. And I feel as an industry, we're not as educated as we should be. We're very educated on the technology side, but maybe not necessarily as educated as we could be on the strategy side.
Terrific. All right, so we're gonna start to wind this thing down. I want to ask anybody who's still on the stream, if they have any questions, please either put them on Twitter or send it into the stream, and we'll answer them before we go. John Green, I love the comment that you made. Yes, we all have to work together. I'm glad that you appreciated this format for how many people have participated in it. I'll look if there are any last questions going on right now. But before I do that, let's do one more set of commercials. Teresa, why don't you tell us in 5 or sentences or less, what you guys do here and how they can get in touch with you if you want.
Absolutely. So Verrex.com, we're a global integrator. We're in New York, Boston, Houston, Los Angeles, Hong Kong, and Shanghai. Again, as we said, we focus primarily on the corporate market. It makes us unique in the industry. We don't split our focus across multiple vertical markets. So we're growing. We continue to grow on a global basis. And in terms of capabilities, we focus primarily on understanding what our end users are looking for and finding those solutions.
Terrific. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you.
I'm Ann Aaron. I wear 2 hats. I'm the founding chairperson of AVNCCA, the Nonprofit Industry Association. We're the ones that are championing and sponsoring Collaboration Week New York this coming week. I am also president of a 37-year-old management consulting firm known as Telemanagement Resources International, Inc., or TRI. And we do everything in the space that does not require a screwdriver. We sell no technology, we integrate no technology, but we do a lot of upfront needs assessments, designs, and back-end usage and adoption.
That's a great tag. I like that tagline.
I didn't think of a better use of the term for screwdriver, but that's not for now. We have the cocktail party this week. Anyway, so I'm David Danto. I'm the IMCCA's Director of Emerging Technology. I have more hats than anybody in the industry. I do an AVNation TV show, Connected, every once in a while when Tim lets me do it. I'm also the editor of Sound and Communications ITAV Report. I am the IMCCA's Director of Emerging Technology, and I just started a new role with Polycom Plantronics as their Director of UC Strategy and Research. It's been a pleasure to do this. You guys can always catch me online. Just Google me. That's the best way to get a hold of me. Just Google David Danto and see what comes up, and hopefully it's all good and you can reach me just by clicking any one of those links. I'm going to check online one more time if there are any last questions, and if there aren't, I'm going to thank, oh, here we go. Greg Raphael is thanking everybody for taking the time, and they like the panel. So I think this format worked. I don't know how many times Chris and I and anybody else are going to get up at 4 in the morning on a Sunday to be able to bring this to you, but we're a pleasure to do it. I hope to see everybody that's in the New York area at Collaboration Week this week, starting with the event from Crestron tomorrow at the Microsoft offices, and hopefully you'll see. And we are going to try to live stream the Gala Awards dinner tomorrow night. The dinner starts at 5:30. We probably are not going to start the stream until about 6:30. I'm not sure how great the internet is going to be at the restaurant. So if for some reason we can't get the live stream out, we'll put up a GIF of a kitten playing with a ball. We'll record it, and then AVNation TV will post it later so that everybody can take a look at both the State of the Industry panel that Ann is doing and the awards that we're giving out to Jason and Snora and their remarks. Thanks very much for watching this morning. I appreciate it. I'm going to go take a nap. I don't know what you guys are going to do.
I'm heading home and then to New York.
Okay, and I will see everybody in Manhattan the next 3 days.
And our thanks to Verrex for doing this for us.
Absolutely.
Thanks for letting us. This has been great, and it's a pleasure being on a panel and having you very knowledgeable people as part of it. So
and
before
we close the stream, Tim in the background there, is this available for replay if anybody wants to see it? Will this be postable, or is this gone? It will be. So at some point for AVNation, the stream will be posted, and we'll put it up on AVintheAM over the next couple of weeks. Just to be very clear, this is Chris Netto. Chris, are you here? You want to say goodbye? This is AVintheAM on Sunday. We very much appreciate being part of it, and want to thank Chris for this brainchild that he has of all of us talking on Sundays. Collaboration Week has 23 terrific sponsors and a lot of partners, one of which is AVNation TV, so that's why they're doing this for us today. And I think I'm going to wrap this up.
Excellent.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.